The rain felt like needles on my skin, or maybe that was just the weight of 1,000 staring eyes. My name is Alara, and today I was unmade. My knees hit the muddy earth of the ceremonial clearing, the cold seeping through my thin linen pants. I didn't feel it, I only felt the scorching brand of their collective gaze. The entire Silvermane pack was here, a sea of faces under the weeping gray sky, their expressions ranging from pity to outright contempt, and at the front on the stone dais stood my family. My father Alpha Arcturus, his face a mask of stony disappointment. My mother Luna Selene, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears she would not let fall for me. And my brother Kieran, the golden heir, whose jaw was tight with something that might have been shame or just irritation at the delay. Alpha Arcturus's voice, amplified by the power of his rank, rolled over the assembly, devoid of all warmth. It was a sound I had once found comforting. Now it flayed me alive. Alara of the Silvermane, he intoned, the ritual words turning to ice. You have reached your 20th year. The moon has risen over you 13 times since your first shift. And yet no secondary gender has manifested. No alpha's strength, no beta's balance, no omega's grace. The pack spirit is silent for you. A low murmur ran through the crowd. I kept my eyes on the mud, on a single blade of grass bent under the weight of a raindrop. Focus on that, I begged myself. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry in front of them. The law of our ancestors is clear, my father continued, and the pain in my chest sharpened. He wasn't my father in this moment. He was the Alpha pronouncing judgment. A white wolf without a designation is a ghost within the pack. A limb that cannot feel the pack bond is a limb that must be released. My breath hitched, a small, pathetic sound swallowed by the rain, released, such a gentle word for exile, for being cut off from the only home, the only heartbeat I had ever known. Therefore, Alpha Arcturus declared, his final words striking with the force of a physical blow, you are henceforth Omega-stained, you carry the burden of absence. You may dwell within the territorial bounds, but you are outside the pack bond. You will not join in hunts, in councils, in ceremonies. Your voice holds no weight, you are a shadow. This is the will of the pack and the moon. The formal rejection slammed into me, a silent, psychic wave. One moment there was the low hum of the pack link in the back of my mind, a comforting sense of presence, of belonging like distant music. The next, silence. A void so profound, so deafening that I physically swayed. It was the loneliest sound in the world. The absence of a sound that had been my birthright, I was untethered, adrift. Let the ceremony conclude, my brother Kieran's voice rang out, brisk and efficient. He was already moving on. The pack began to disperse, their whispers now unchecked. Always was a weak thing. A flaw in the Alpha's line. What use is a wolf that cannot connect? I forced myself to stand. My legs trembled, but I locked my knees. I would not crawl away. I lifted my head, meeting my mother's eyes for one fleeting second. The sorrow in them was deep, but it was anchored by duty. She gave the slightest shake of her head, a warning, do not make a scene. Then she turned and followed my father and brother into the great lodge, away from the cold and away from me. The clearing emptied, leaving me alone with the drumming rain, the Omega-stained. It was a cruel title. Omegas were rare, cherished, the emotional heart of a pack, blessed with a powerful, soothing bond. I was the opposite, a null point. A stain of emptiness where a gift should have been. I didn't return to the family quarters. My belongings, a meager sack of clothes and a few personal items, had already been moved to the outskirts. The Staines' cottage, they called it. A dilapidated hut near the forbidden western ridge where the forest grew dense and silent. It was a place for broken things. The walk was a blur of gray-green and cold. The cottage was as grim as promised, mossy stone, a sagging roof, a single room smelling of damp earth and neglect. I dropped my sack inside the door and kept walking. I couldn't breathe in there. The silence of the broken bond was a pressure in my skull, and I needed to outrun it. I ran into the woods not as a wolf, my shift was as clumsy and powerless as the rest of me, but on two human legs, stumbling over roots, letting the brambles tear at my clothes. The rain mingled with the hot, silent tears finally streaking down my face. I ran until my lungs burned and the light began to fade, not caring where I was. That's when I heard it, a sound that cut through the dripping forest silence and the howling void inside me. It wasn't a growl. It was a rumble, deep and resonant, vibrating up from the earth itself, a sound of pure, untamed fury and agony. I froze, my breath pluming in the chilly air. I knew where I was, the foot of the western ridge, and I knew what lay in the caverns above. Skal, the giant white wolf, a creature of legend older than the packs, a force of nature given fur and fang. For generations, alphas had tried to bind him to prove their worth by riding the beast into battle. For generations, they had failed. The mightiest of our kind had been thrown, mauled, or simply ignored by the colossal creature. He was a living trial, a monument to failure, kept on the sacred grounds, a challenge that taunted every alpha born. The rumble came again, followed by a sharp, pained whine that belied the beast's size. It was a sound that spoke of a suffering so deep it transcended species. Without thinking, driven by a compulsion I didn't understand, I began to climb. The path was treacherous, slick with wet stone, but I scrambled up, drawn by that terrible, lonely sound. I reached a ledge that opened into a vast, shadowy cavern, and there he was. Skal was massive, far larger than any telling had described. He was the size of a small cottage, his fur a tumultuous mix of storm cloud gray and charcoal black, with eyes like chips of molten gold now dim with pain. He was lying on his side, his great ribcage heaving, and I saw the source of his anguish. A huge, jagged shard of dark metal, like a corrupted thorn, was embedded deep in his shoulder. The flesh around it was swollen and pulsed with a sickly, violet light. It was no natural injury. It reeked of dark magic, of poison. He saw me. His massive head lifted, and a warning growl erupted from his throat, shaking pebbles from the cavern's ceiling. It was a sound meant to send me fleeing in terror, but I didn't flee. The void where my pack bond had been echoed his isolated fury. His pain mirrored the raw, gaping wound in my own spirit. We were both alone, both rejected, both in agony. I took a step forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. "It's all right," I whispered, my voice trembling, not with the fear I should have felt, but with a strange, aching empathy. "I'm not going to hurt you." The giant white wolf stared, his golden eyes narrowing. He snorted, a dismissive huff of air. I was nothing. A scentless, powerless human girl. I took another step, then another, moving slowly, my hands open at my sides. "I can see it's hurting you," I said, my voice growing steadier, softened by a compassion I hadn't known I still possessed. "That thorn, it doesn't belong there." I was within reach now. One swipe of his paw could end me. His gaze tracked me, intelligent and wary. I sank to my knees in the damp earth of the cavern floor, not in submission, but to make myself smaller, less threatening. "May I?" I breathed, my hand hovering in the air, pointing toward the shard. He watched me for a long, endless moment. The forest held its breath. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from the very roots of the mountain, the great wolf laid his head back down on the stone, closing his eyes. It wasn't permission, it was exhaustion, a surrender to his fate, but I chose to take it as a chance. Gently, so gently, I placed my hands on his fur near the wound. It was coarse and warm, thrumming with a latent power that made my fingertips tingle. The vile energy from the shard bit at my skin, a cold burn. I ignored it. I focused on the heat of his body, the rhythm of his labored breath. "This will hurt," I warned him, my voice a thread of sound. I wrapped my hands around the base of the dark shard. The moment I touched it, a jolt of blinding, icy pain shot up my arms. I cried out, but I didn't let go. I pulled, Skal roared. The sound was earth-shattering, a blast of pure torment that echoed through the ridge. He jerked and I was thrown back, the corrupted thorn clutched in my hands, now dripping with both his blood and that strange violet light. I scrambled away as he lurched to his feet, towering over me, his lips pulled back from teeth longer than my hand. I crouched, holding the poisonous shard away from me, waiting for the killing blow. I had dared to touch him, to cause him more pain. This was how I would die, but the blow didn't come. Skal stood, panting, staring down at me. The furious glare in his eyes, it was changing. The sickly violet light was receding from the wound, which now bled clean, crimson blood. The tension bled from his massive frame. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his first clean breath in who knew how long. He lowered his head, bringing his enormous muzzle close to me. I could feel his hot breath on my skin. I closed my eyes. A warm, rough sensation brushed across my cheek. He was nuzzling me, very carefully, with a gentleness unimaginable for such a beast. My eyes flew open. The molten gold of his eyes was clear now, fixed on me with an unnerving, profound intensity. He looked from my face to the dark shard I still clutched, then back to my face. In that look I saw not a monster, but a creature of immense and lonely power. And in that moment the howling void inside me didn't fill, but it echoed with a new foreign sound, not the pack bond, something else, something wilder and older. He nudged my shoulder with his nose, a clear push. Then he turned and paced back into the depths of his cavern, casting one last, inscrutable glance my way before disappearing into the shadows. I sat there in the gathering dark, the rain-cooled air sharp in my lungs, the poisonous thorn cold in my hand. The mark of my rejection still felt fresh on my skin, but as I looked toward the dark cavern where the impossible wolf had vanished, a single, defiant thought ignited in the silence. They called me a ghost, a stain, but a ghost couldn't touch a legend. And a stain couldn't pull a thorn from the heart of a storm. I stumbled back to the stain's cottage in a daze, the dark shard wrapped in a strip torn from my tunic. My hand still tingled, a strange, cold fire lingering where I had gripped the corrupted metal. The void where my pack bond had been was still there, a silent, aching hollow in my mind. But now there was a whisper in that void, not a sound, a sensation, a low, resonant thrum like feeling the deep note of a bell through stone. It was the echo of Skal's presence, a warmth against the cold emptiness. It didn't speak, it didn't connect like the pack link, it simply was, a mountain on the horizon, a storm sleeping in the hills. And somehow I knew it was aware of me, a tiny, flickering light at the edge of its vast perception. The cottage was dark and colder than the forest. I lit the single, guttering oil lamp with trembling fingers. In its weak light I unwrapped the shard. It was about the length of my forearm, jagged and wicked, its surface seeming to drink the lamplight rather than reflect it. That sickly violet glow had faded to a dull, intermittent pulse like a dying ember, but the malevolence it radiated was palpable. This was no natural object. It was a weapon deliberately forged and aimed. Who would do this? Who could do this to a creature like Skal? The questions swirled, frightening in their implications. This was beyond pack rivalries. This smelled of the old, forbidden magics, the kind spoken of in warnings by elder wolves. A soft knock at the door nearly made me jump out of my skin. I hastily covered the shard again, shoving it under the thin pallet that served as a bed. "Who is it?" My voice came out rough, scratchy. "It's me, Lyra." A wave of fragile relief washed over me. Lyra was a beta, a weaver's daughter, not a close friend. I had none of those, but one of the few who had never openly mocked my weakness. She'd sometimes shared her lunch with me when I was training alone. I opened the door. She stood there, a hood pulled over her auburn hair, a basket in her hands. Her kind, oval face was pinched with worry. She slipped in quickly, closing the door behind her. "Ilara," she breathed, her eyes scanning my torn, muddy clothes, the scratches on my arms. "By the moon, are you all right?" I heard a terrible roar from the western ridge. The whole pack felt a tremor of fear through the bond. Some of the hunters thought it was an earthquake. She paused, her gaze searching mine. You weren't up there, were you?" The concern in her voice was a balm and a torment. She could still feel the pack bond. She belonged. I was a ghost to it now. "I went for a walk," I said, the half-truth bitter on my tongue. My voice was low, guarded. The woods are the only place left for me. Lyra's expression softened with pity. I stiffened. Pity was a cage with velvet bars. "I brought you some things," she said, setting the basket on the rickety table. "Bread, cheese, a wedge of dried meat, a few apples, and this." She pulled out a thick woolen blanket. "It gets cold out here." "Thank you," I murmured, genuine gratitude warring with shame. I was now an object of charity. "Alara," she hesitated, twisting her fingers. "Kieran the Alfair, he's announced a trial for Skull." Ice water trickled down my spine. "A trial, what do you mean?" "In 3 days' time. He says the pack needs a symbol of strength now more than ever, that his father's reign is cautious. He believes it is his destiny to succeed where all others have failed, to ride the giant wolf and prove the Silvermane's might for the next generation." Lyra's words tumbled out, laced with a nervous energy. "The whole pack is buzzing with it. He's been training relentlessly." A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. Kieran, with his unwavering confidence and alpha strength, approaching Skull, the image of my brother, proud, powerful, but utterly unaware of the poison, of the pain, of the creature's profound intelligence, filled me with a dread that was entirely new. It wasn't just fear for him, it was fear of him, of what he might provoke. "He can't," I whispered, more to myself than to her. Lyra misread my terror. "He's the strongest of his generation, Alara, maybe he can." She reached out, touching my arm. The pack bond allowed her to offer a tiny pulse of comfort. I felt nothing but the pressure of her fingers. She flinched, remembering my isolation. "I'm sorry, I should go, they'll notice I'm missing." She left as quietly as she came, leaving the food and the blanket and a world of trouble behind. I couldn't eat. I sat on the floor, my back against the cold stone wall, listening to the whisper in my void, the thrumming, mountain-like presence. "He doesn't know," I thought, pouring my anxiety toward that presence. "He'll see you as a beast, a challenge. He won't understand." There was no response, just the steady, resonant thrum, but the quality of it shifted minutely. A slight edge like distant thunder on a clear day. A note of anticipation, or warning. The next 2 days were a strange limbo. I avoided the main pack grounds, skulking around the edges like the shadow I was proclaimed to be. I foraged for herbs, my hands still oddly sensitive, seeming to find the healing plants by instinct. I cleaned the cottage, the mindless work unable to drown out the growing tension, and I felt the pack preparing. The energy was palpable even to an outsider. A fervent, excited buzz, drums practiced for ceremony, the clang of blacksmiths checking armor. Kieran was everywhere, a golden center of attention, radiating certainty. On the morning of the 3rd day, the day of the trial, I awoke before dawn, my heart already racing. The whisper in my void was no longer a thrum. It was a low, steady growl, vibrating in the very marrow of my bones. Skull was not sleeping, he was waiting. I couldn't stay in the cottage. A compulsion, fiercer than any I'd ever known, pulled me toward the ridge. I had to be there, I had to see. I took a hidden, game trail path up the ridge, one that emerged onto a high, secluded outcrop shrouded in gorse and hawthorn. It gave me a clear, if distant, view of the cavern entrance and the broad, rocky platform before it. Below, in the clearing at the ridge's base, the entire Silvermane pack had gathered. Colors, banners, expectant faces turned upward. My father and mother sat on a raised dais, regal and impassive. My brother stood before them, clad not in finery, but in practical, reinforced leathers. He looked every inch the heroic alpha to be. The ceremony began with horns and chanting. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the rituals, the calling of ancestral strength, the proclamation of intent. Kieran raised his arms, his voice, strong and clear, carrying up the mountainside. He then turned and began the climb, not the treacherous path I had taken, but the formal, time-worn stairs cut into the stone. My breath caught in my throat. the growl in my mind deepened. I could feel a pressure building in the air, a static charge before a lightning strike. Kieran reached the platform. He stood tall, his aura of alpha command radiating outwards, a force meant to dominate and compel. I could feel its echo, a blunt, demanding pressure even from my hiding spot. "Skal," he shouted, his voice ringing with authority. "Ancient One, Beast of the Mountain, I am Kieran, son of Arcturus, Alpha heir of the Silvermane. I come to claim the pact forgotten. I come to ride you into legend." Silence. Then, from the deep black of the cavern, 2 points of molten gold ignited. They emerged, followed by the colossal, storm-furred head, the powerful shoulders. Skal stepped out into the gray morning light, dwarfing my brother. The pack below gasped as one, a sound of awe and terror. Kieran, to his credit, did not falter. He took a step forward, his will pressing against the creature. "Kneel," he commanded, the alpha power saturating the word. Skal's lips pulled back. The growl that emerged wasn't just in my mind now. It was a physical wave of sound that shook dust from the rocks. It was a refusal that shook the very foundations of Kieran's certainty. Kieran's face hardened. He tried again, his power flaring brighter. "I am your destined rider." "Kneel." Skal took a step forward, then another. He didn't kneel. He stalked toward Kieran, his head low, his gaze locked on the young alpha heir. It wasn't submission, it was assessment, and it was found wanting. Panic flickered in Kieran's eyes, quickly masked by fury. This was not going as the stories said. The beast was not ignoring him, nor was it attacking in mindless rage. It was judging him and finding him lacking. "You will obey," Kieran roared, and in a flash of light and coalescing power he shifted. Where a man had stood was now a magnificent, silver-furred wolf, large and powerful, muscles coiled. He bared his teeth, a challenge in every line of his body, a mistake, a terrible, prideful mistake. Skal's response was instantaneous. A roar not of pain as I had heard, but of pure, unadulterated wrath. It was the sound of a mountain deciding to move. He didn't pounce, he simply charged, a tidal wave of fur and fury. Kieran, for all his strength, was a leaf in a hurricane. He was batted aside with a swipe of a paw that looked almost casual. He yelped, tumbling across the stone, scrambling to find purchase. He tried to rally, to dart in an attack, but Skal was a force of nature. Another blow sent him crashing into the rock face with a sickening thud. He shifted back to human form, bruised, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, his clothes torn, his pride in tatters. The pack below was dead silent, horror-struck. Skal loomed over my brother's prone form, his muzzle dipping down. Kieran froze, staring death in its golden eyes, and in that moment the whisper in my void became a scream. Not of anger, but of a desperate, protective urge that blazed through me, hotter than any pack bond. I didn't think, I acted. I broke from my hiding spot, scrambling down the rough slope toward the platform, stones skittering under my feet. "No," the cry was ripped from my throat, raw and primal. Every eye the pack below, Kieran's on the ground, and the giant, molten gold ones above snapped to me. The stained Omega, the ghost, charging onto the sacred trial ground. "Skal, stop!" I shouted, throwing myself between the giant wolf and my brother, my arms spread wide. I faced the creature, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Please, don't." The world held its breath. Skal's gaze shifted from Kieran to me. The wrath in his eyes, it didn't vanish, but it banked, tempered by something akin to curiosity. He sniffed the air, his massive head tilting. I slowly lowered my arms, my entire body trembling. I took a step toward him, my voice dropping to a murmur meant only for him. He didn't know, he doesn't understand, like I didn't understand until I saw the thorn. I heard Kieran stir behind me, a groan of pain and shock. "Ilara, what are you? Get away from it." I ignored him. I kept my eyes on Skal. The giant wolf stared at me for a long, endless moment. Then he snorted, a hot breath that stirred my hair. He took one last look at the cowed alpha heir, a look of profound disdain, then turned. With a final, earth-shaking rumble that was pure dismissal, he paced back into the darkness of his cavern, leaving me standing alone on the platform, shielding the air of the Silvermane pack. The silence from below was shattered by a rising wave of stunned murmurs. I turned slowly to face my brother. His expression was a maelstrom of pain, humiliation, and a dawning, terrible realization. He wasn't looking at the beast, he was looking at me. At the sister without a scent, without a bond, who had just commanded the unconquerable. And in his eyes I didn't see gratitude, I saw the first cold spark of fear. The descent from the ridge was a silent, agonizing procession. Kieran refused my help, limping on his own, his face a rigid mask of stoic pain. 2 senior betas rushed up the formal stairs to assist him, shooting me looks of utter bewilderment. I followed behind, a ghost once more, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes like physical blows. The pack parted before us, a sea of whispers. She stood before Skull, the beast listened to her, the stained Omega commanded, the giant commanded. That was the word they used. It wasn't true. I had begged, I had pleaded from a place of shared understanding. But to them it looked like dominion, and in a world built on dominance, that was the only lens they had. We were led not to the healing halls, but directly to the Alpha's lodge. My father's summons was a given. The great hall was empty of all but family and the highest-ranking elders. The air was thick with tension and the scent of my brother's blood. Alpha Arcturus sat on his carved throne, Luna Selene beside him, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Kieran was eased into a chair, a healer already hovering, tending to the gash on his brow and his likely cracked ribs. I stood in the center of the room, exposed, still in my dirty, torn clothes from my scramble down the ridge. Explain. My father's voice was a low, dangerous rumble, all paternal pretense stripped away. Kieran spoke first, his voice tight with pain and fury. The beast was enraged, unpredictable. It rejected the challenge, it attacked with malice. He shot a glance at me, his eyes hard. Then she intervened. Shouted at it, threw herself in the way. I don't know what trick she used, but it turned and left. All eyes turned to me. The elder council, stern-faced men and women who had voted for my staining, watched with icy scrutiny. "Ilara," my mother said, her voice strained. "What possessed you? You could have been killed." I took a shallow breath. My voice felt small in the vast hall. I wasn't possessed, I couldn't watch him die. "You interfered in a sacred alpha trial, Elder Torvin, a wolf with a face like weathered granite, intoned. An unpardonable transgression. The stained has no place on the sacred ground, let alone to disrupt pack destiny." "Her actions saved your heir's life," my mother countered, a flicker of her steel showing. "Did they?" Alpha Arcturus's gaze was fixed on me, probing, analytical. "Or did they undermine it?" Kieran's trial was one of dominance. Either he would dominate the beast or be dominated by it. "That is the way, to be spared by an Omega-stained no less." He let the sentence hang, its implication more damaging than any physical wound. Kieran flinched, the shame burning brighter than his injuries. "How did you know the beast would not kill you?" Another elder, Nara, asked, her sharp eyes missing nothing. This was the precipice. I could lie. I could say I was mad with grief, that I acted without thought. But the memory of the dark shard under my palate, of Skull's intelligent, pained eyes pressed on me. "They saw a monster. I had seen a wounded sovereign. I've been to the ridge before," I admitted, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "After the staining, I heard it in pain. I found Skull wounded. There was a piece of dark metal, like a poisoned thorn, lodged in his shoulder. I removed it." A stunned silence blanketed the hall. "You touched the sacred beast?" Elder Torvin breathed, aghast. "You removed a weapon from its flesh." My father leaned forward, his alpha aura pressing down on me, demanding truth. "Describe this thorn." I did, the jagged metal, the unnatural violet light, the cold malevolence. As I spoke, the elders exchanged grim looks. My father's face grew darker. "Dark iron," he finally said, the word falling like a tombstone. Forged in the old, blighted forges, used by sorcerers and betrayers, it hasn't been seen in these lands for a century. His eyes narrowed at me, and you simply pulled it out without consequence. My hands still feel cold, I said, holding them out. They looked normal, but the eerie chill in my bones was real. But he was in agony, it was poisoning him, I couldn't leave it. And after you removed this dark iron shard, my mother asked slowly, what happened? I met her gaze. He let me go, he nudged me as if in thanks. I omitted the nuzzle, the profound connection, that was for the whisper in my void alone. Impossible, Kieran spat, wincing as the healer tightened a bandage. The beast knows only rage, it doesn't reason, it doesn't feel gratitude. Then how do you explain its retreat today, Alfair? Elder Nara asked, not unkindly, but with pointed logic. If it knows only rage, why did it not slaughter the Omega who stood before it? Why did it obey her command to desist? It wasn't obedience, I screamed internally, but I held my tongue. This changes things, Alpha Arcturus murmured, more to himself than to the room. He stood pacing before his throne, a weapon of dark magic used against a creature of primal power on our very borders, an attack we did not detect. He stopped, his gaze landing on me again, but now it was the gaze of a strategist, not a disappointed father. And you, Ilara, a null, a void in the pack bond, yet you can approach Skal, you can touch him, he tolerates your presence, perhaps even acknowledges it. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I was no longer just a stain, I was a curiosity. A potential tool, what are you suggesting, Arcturus? Luna Selene asked, her voice tight. I am suggesting that the moon's rejection may have other purposes, he said carefully. A wolf the pack bond cannot touch. A wolf, a creature of ancient magic, does not perceive as a threat, or perhaps perceives as something else entirely. You cannot be thinking of using her, my mother said, a thread of horror in her voice. The safety of the pack is paramount, Elder Torvin stated. If the stained one has a unique rapport with the beast, it must be explored. This dark iron is a declaration of a hidden enemy. Skal is a power on our land, we must understand this connection. I felt the walls of a new, more gilded cage closing in around me, from rejected outcast to peculiar asset in the blink of an eye. No, Kieran said, pushing himself up in his chair, his face pale but determined. It is my burden, my failure, I will recover. I will train harder, I will face Skal again and fulfill my destiny. We do not need to resort to this. He couldn't even look at me. Your bravery is noted, my son, Alpha Arcturus said, but his tone was final. But destiny has presented a different path today. One we cannot ignore, Ilara. I stiffened as he addressed me directly. You will return to the ridge, you will attempt to commune with Skal further, you will learn what you can about this attack, about his nature. You will be our eyes and ears where no other wolf can go. It was an order from the Alpha to me, the bondless ghost. The irony was a bitter pill. Father, you can't be serious, Kieran protested. I am utterly serious, the Alpha said, his voice brooking no argument. Ilara, you remain Omega-stained, the edict stands, but you now have a duty to the pack that transcends that status. You will report to me and to the Elder Council directly. Do you understand? I understood. I was being sent back into the lion's den, not as a healer, but as a spy. The fragile thread of understanding I had with Skal was about to be tested, maybe corrupted, by the demands of the pack that had cast me out. I looked at my brother's furious, humiliated face, at my mother's worried eyes, at my father's calculating expression. The whisper in my void pulsed, a steady, anchoring rhythm against the storm of their politics. I had no choice. But perhaps for the first time I had a purpose that wasn't about shame. I understand, I said, my voice quiet but clear in the silent hall. Good, Alpha Arcturus said, begin at dawn. Dismissed, I turned and walked out of the lodge, leaving the warmth, the tension, and the weight of their expectations behind. The cool evening air was a relief. I looked up toward the western ridge, now shrouded in twilight. The whisper in my void was a low, questioning hum. I'm sorry, I thought toward the mountain, toward the storm wolf. They don't see you, they only see what you can do for them, and now they're using me to see it too. The hum deepened, not in anger, but in what felt like a weary acknowledgement. He knew. Of course he knew, he had lived through centuries of such schemes. As I walked back to my isolated cottage, a new resolve hardened within me. I would do as the Alpha commanded, I would go to Skal, but I would not be their spy, I would be a translator. A bridge, and maybe, just maybe, I could protect the ancient, lonely creature from the pack that wanted to own him, and the pack from the wrath of the sovereign they foolishly provoked. The game had changed. The stakes were higher than my loneliness. And I, the wolf with no bond, was now the most important piece on the board. Dawn came, cold and sharp. I dressed in the sturdiest clothes. I had worn leather pants, a thick tunic, Lyra's wool blanket fastened around my shoulders like a cloak. I packed a small satchel, water, a little of the food Lyra brought, and the dark iron shard, now wrapped in layers of cloth and tucked into an inner pocket. Its presence was a constant, icy whisper against my side, a reminder of the hidden danger. My journey to the ridge felt different today. It wasn't a flight into the woods to escape pain. It was a deliberate pilgrimage laden with dual purpose. The pack's eyes felt on me as I passed the outermost sentry posts. Whispers followed. There goes the beast whisperer. The Alpha's new pet project. The titles were no kinder than Stain. I took my hidden path, my senses heightened. The forest seemed more alive today. I noticed the specific scent of damp pine bark, the intricate pattern of spiderwebs beaded with dew, the distant, rhythmic knocking of a woodpecker. It was as if removing the pack bond's constant, low-level noise had turned up the volume on everything else. Or perhaps it was the echo of Skal's presence in my mind, tuning me to a wilder frequency. I reached the high outcrop first, pausing to catch my breath. Below, the ceremonial platform was empty, marked only by scuffs and a faint, dark stain of Kieran's blood. A monument to failed ambition. I looked toward the cavern mouth, a dark maw in the sun-washed stone. The low, resonant thrum in my mind intensified. It was an acknowledgement. Taking a deep breath, I descended to the platform. Standing before the cavern entrance was like standing at the edge of the world. The darkness within was absolute, but the thrum was a warm, living pulse pulling me forward. Skal, I called, my voice echoing softly. It's Alara, I've returned. Silence. Then the soft scrape of a colossal claw on stone. The two golden eyes ignited from the deep black, moving toward me. He emerged into the light, his storm-gray fur seeming to shift and move like living cloud. He stopped a few paces away, towering over me, his head lowered to my level. His intelligent gaze swept over me, pausing at the satchel at my side. He sniffed the air, and a low, questioning rumble vibrated in his chest. He was smelling the dark iron. I brought it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My Alpha, my father, he commanded me to come, to learn from you, to ask about this. I patted the satchel. They are afraid, they call it dark iron, they say it is a weapon of enemies. Skal huffed, a sound of profound disdain. He turned his head, looking back into his cavern, then back at me. He took a step backward into the shadows, then paused, looking over his shoulder at me, an invitation. My heart leapt into my throat. No one in all the legends had ever been invited into Skal's den. It was the ultimate forbidden space. To enter was either supreme trust or a terrible trap. The thrum in my mind was calm, expectant. I chose to trust it. I followed him into the darkness. The cavern wasn't a crude hole. It was a vast, cathedral-like space, the ceiling lost in shadow. Light filtered in from high, narrow fissures, painting shafts of gold on the stone floor. And the floor, it took my breath away. It was covered in a thick, soft layer of moss, lichen, and delicate, bioluminescent fungi that glowed with a soft blue-green light like a carpet of fallen stars. The air was cool, clean, and smelled of stone, ozone, and living earth. This was no monster's lair. It was a sanctuary. Skull paced to the center of the cavern and lay down on the starry moss, curling his massive body with a sigh. He watched me, waiting. I slowly walked further in, my awe palpable. "It's beautiful," I whispered, and the cavern seemed to swallow the sound, making it sacred. I sat down, not too close, folding my legs beneath me. I carefully unwrapped the dark iron shard, laying the cloth on the moss between us. The shard pulsed dully, an ugly blot against the natural beauty. Skull's gaze fixed on it, and a growl, soft but full of old anger, trickled from his throat. "Who did this to you?" I asked softly. He didn't speak, could he speak? But an image, sharp and sudden, flashed into my mind. Not through words, but through the connection we shared, the whisper in the void. I saw figures, hooded and shadowy, moving with unnatural silence through a moonless night on the far side of the ridge. I felt a sharp, burning pain in my shoulder, his shoulder. The memory of the ambush, the surprise, the venomous cold of the metal piercing his flesh. The figures had fled immediately after, not staying to see if he fell. Cowards, assassins. The image faded, leaving me trembling. It was one thing to hear a story. It was another to feel the memory of the betrayal in your own bones. They didn't want to fight you, I breathed. They just wanted to poison you, to weaken you. Why? Another ripple through the connection. This time a cascade of sensations, the weight of territory, the flow of ley lines beneath the earth, a sense of ancient guardianship. Skull was not just a beast on this land, he was part of it, a keystone. His health, his presence, was tied to the health of the territory itself. Poison him and you poison the land. Weaken him and you weaken the natural barriers that protected this stretch of wilderness, including the Silvermane lands. A cold realization dawned. This wasn't just an attack on a legend. It was the first move in a war. The hidden enemy wanted the ridge, and they needed the guardian gone to take it. "The pack needs to know this," I said, urgency coloring my voice. "They think it's just a challenge, a symbol. They don't understand you're a guardian." Skull's mental rumble held a note of deep skepticism. He showed me another flash, my father's calculating eyes, Kieran's arrogant challenge, the generations of alphas seeing him as a trophy to be mounted. He didn't trust them, and why should he? "I know," I said, my shoulders slumping. "They don't see, but I am here, I see." I met his golden eyes. "Let me be the bridge, let me show them, not for their glory, for the safety of this place, for your home." He studied me for a long time, then he did something astonishing. He lowered his great head until his muzzle rested on the moss right beside the dark iron shard. He closed his eyes, and he began to hum, not a growl, a deep, resonant, melodic vibration that rose from his chest and filled the cavern. The star moss beneath him brightened in response. The very air shimmered, and then images clearer than before began to flow into me, not of pain or threat, but of knowledge, of the language of the land. I saw how the roots of the trees spoke to the stones, how the rivers carried memories to the sea. I felt the slow, patient heartbeat of the mountain. He was teaching me, showing me the world through his senses. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying. I was a single note being asked to understand a symphony, but I listened. I opened the void within me, the empty space where a pack bond should have been, and I let his ancient song fill it. Time lost meaning. I sat in the starlit cavern as the light from the fissures moved across the floor. I learned of the secret springs that held healing, of the stones that remembered old battles, of the wind that carried warnings. He showed me the faint, sickly tinge on the edge of his territory, the blight beginning where the dark iron's poison had seeped into the earth. Finally, the flow of images slowed. I was exhausted, my mind stretched in new, incredible ways, but my spirit felt more full than it ever had, even with the pack bond. I looked at the dark iron shard. Now, through Skull's teaching, I could see the poison in it, a writhing, malevolent energy. On impulse, I reached out not to touch it, but to place my palm above it. I focused on what I had just learned, on the song of the clean, living stone. I didn't know what I was doing, I just let the resonance of the mountain, filtered through my connection to Skal, flow down my arm. A soft, silver light, moonlight it seemed, though none was here, flickered around my fingertips. Where it touched the violet pulse of the dark iron, the sickly light dimmed, recoiled. I couldn't destroy it, it was too strong, too forged in hate, but for a moment I had pushed it back, I had soothed its malevolence. I pulled my hand back, stunned. The silver light faded. I looked at Skal, his golden eyes were wide open, watching me with an expression I could only describe as shock. Then that shock melted into something else, something like wonder and a fierce, proud recognition. He lifted his head and let out a soft woof of air, nudging my knee with his nose, a gentle, deliberate touch. In that moment, the whisper in the void wasn't an echo anymore, it was a duet. A bond forged not by blood or dominance, but by shared understanding and a promise to protect. I had come as a spy, I had been remade as a student, and I was beginning to understand that my emptiness, my rejection, had not been a flaw, it had been preparation. A vessel, emptied of one kind of magic, now perfectly shaped to hold another. I returned to the pack lands as the sun dipped below the trees, casting long, skeletal shadows. I moved like a sleepwalker, my mind still resonating with the symphony of the mountain, my bones humming with the echo of Skal's song. The sensory overload of the forest, the chatter of life, the scent of pine and loam was both overwhelming and beautiful. I was no longer just looking at the world, I was listening to it, but the beauty was a fragile shell over a core of dread. I carried two burdens now, the physical dark iron shard in my satchel and the terrifying knowledge in my heart. How could I translate the language of stones and ancient guardians into something the Alpha and his council would understand? They spoke in terms of territory, strength, and threat. Could I make them hear the land's whispered plea? I went straight to the Alpha's lodge as commanded. The guards at the door eyed me with a new, wary respect, but didn't bar my way. I was expected. The Elder Council was convened in the strategy room, a somber space dominated by a large table carved with a map of Silvermane territory. Alpha Arcturus, Luna Selene, Kieran, his arm in a sling, face still bruised, and the three senior elders were present. The air was thick with tension and the scent of wolf willow incense burned for clarity. "Ilara," my father said by way of greeting, his gaze sharp. "Report." All eyes were on me. I felt the void within me, now filled with Skal's resonance, as a palpable thing. I took a steadying breath, my voice quiet but clear in the hushed room. "Skal is not a beast to be dominated," I began, the words feeling inadequate. "He is a guardian, a part of the land itself, the western ridge, the forests there, they are under his protection. His well-being is tied to theirs." Elder Torvin's brows drew together, poetic but unclear. What of the attack? I placed the cloth-wrapped shard on the table and unfolded it. The dark iron lay there, inert but sinister. This was an assassination attempt, not by a rival pack, I think. The memories he shared, the attackers were hooded, silent. They used stealth and poison, not strength. They didn't want to fight, they wanted him weakened and gone. "Shared memories," Kieran interjected, skepticism etching his features. "You speak to it now, not with words," I said, meeting his gaze. "With impressions, images, feelings he showed me, he let me see." I turned back to the Alpha. "The poison from this shard is spreading, it's creating a blight at the edges of his territory. I felt it. He showed me that too. If he falls, the land sickens, and our borders touch that land." A heavy silence fell. "My mother was the first to break it. You felt a blight, how?" "This was the precipice." I looked at my hands. "When I removed the shard, something changed. My connection to the pack bond is gone. But I seem to have a sensitivity to the older magic in the land. Skal is teaching me to understand it." I didn't mention the silver light from my fingertips. That felt too private, too fragile to expose here. "Convenient," Kieran muttered, but he looked uneasy. "A land sickness would explain the odd behavior of the game on the western hunt," Elder Nara mused, tapping a finger on the map. The deer have been listless, the rabbits scarce. We blamed the early frost. Alpha Arcturus leaned forward, studying the shard as if it were a venomous snake. And the purpose, if this hidden enemy removes the guardian, the ridge falls sick. What do they gain? A weakened border, I said, the conclusion I'd reached in the cavern spilling out. A sick land is a vulnerable land. If Skal's power falters, whatever natural barriers he maintains might also fail. It could be a prelude to an invasion. Or, I added, a colder thought crystallizing, they want the ridge itself, for something that requires a dead or dying place. The implications settled over the room like a shroud. This was no longer about a failed rite of passage. This was a strategic threat to the pact's very homeland. Your rapport with the creature, my father said slowly, his eyes locked on mine, can it be used? Can you learn more? Can you determine the source of this blight or the identity of these attackers? The word used grated, but I nodded. I believe so. He trusts me. As much as a being like him can trust any of us, I can go back. I can try to trace the sickness to see if I can learn more about the poison's origin. Then you will, Alpha Arcturus declared. This is now your primary duty. You are exempt from all other obligations of the Stained. You report only to this council. He looked at Kieran. You will focus on your recovery and on strengthening the border patrols. Double the guards on the western tree line, but no one is to approach the ridge. That is Alara's domain. Kieran's jaw tightened, but he gave a sharp, dutiful nod. Understood. I was dismissed. As I turned to leave, my mother's voice, softer, called after me, "Ilara, be careful." I paused at the door, glancing back. Her worry was plain, but so was her acceptance of my new role. I was useful now, a strange tool, but a tool nonetheless. I will, I said, and slipped out into the twilight. The walk back to my cottage was surreal. I was no longer just the rejected daughter. I was the beast whisperer, the land speaker, the Alpha's new scout. The labels whirled in my head. But beneath them, the truth remained. I was a girl with an echo of a mountain in her soul, trying to prevent a war. Back in the cottage, I lit the lamp. The silence was different. It wasn't empty, it was anticipatory. I took out a piece of parchment and a charcoal stick. Closing my eyes, I focused on the impressions Skal had given me, the map of his territory, the feel of the blight. I began to sketch, not with an artist's skill, but with a diviner's intuition. Lines formed, showing the ridge, the healthy, vibrant flows of energy, and then the sickly, encroaching tendrils of violet-gray corruption emanating from a point not where I found Skal wounded, but further north, along a remote stretch of the border. The blight had a source, an entry point. And it was spreading inward. A sharp knock at the door broke my concentration. It was too late for Lyra. Wary, I opened it a crack. Kieran stood there alone, his face pale in the moonlight, his good arm holding a small leather-wrapped bundle. "Brother," I said, startled. "May I come in?" His voice was flat, tired. I stepped back, letting him enter. He looked around the sparse, damp room, his expression unreadable. He placed the bundle on my table. Healing salve from Mother, the good kind from her private stores. He didn't meet my eyes. "Thank you," I said, unsure of this visit's purpose. He stood awkwardly, finally looking at me, his gaze searching my face. "The things you said in there, the land speaking, the guardianship, is it true, or is it some trick of the beast's magic?" There was no hostility in the question now, just a desperate need for truth. My proud, strong brother was adrift, his certainty shattered. "It's true," I said softly, with absolute conviction. "He isn't what we were taught, Kieran. He's so much more, and the danger is real. It's not about righting him, it's about protecting him so he can protect what's ours." He absorbed this, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I stood before him and saw only a prize. You stood before him and saw a king." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "The moon's irony is cruel. It's not about worth," I said, taking a step toward him. "It's about frequency. I was an empty vessel. He filled the silence with a different song. You were already full of the pack's song. There was no room for his." He considered this, then nodded slowly, a glimmer of his old intelligence returning. This source of the blight you mentioned, if you find it, it could lead us to the enemy. I hope so. He looked at me, and for the first time since we were children, I saw no judgment in his eyes, only a grim resolve. Then find it, Alara, and when you do, the Silvermane warriors will be ready. He turned to leave, then paused, and thank you. For the platform, I was a fool, but I wasn't ready to die for my foolishness. He left before I could reply. I stood in the center of my cottage, the salve on the table, my brother's unspoken alliance a new, fragile weight in my chest. The divisions in my family and the pack were shifting. The external threat was forging strange new connections. I looked at my crude map at the marked source of the blight. Tomorrow I would go back to Skull, not just as a student or a spy. I would go as a partner, and together we would hunt the infection to its root. The next morning I approached the ridge with a new purpose humming in my veins. The satchel on my back held provisions, my water skin, and the map I'd drawn. The dark iron shard I left hidden in the cottage, its vile song was a distraction I didn't need. Today was about listening to the land itself. As I climbed my hidden path, I opened my senses as Skull had taught me. I let the visual noise of the forest fade, focusing on the deeper layers. I placed my palm on the trunk of an ancient pine, closing my eyes. Instead of rough bark, I felt a slow, steady pulse of life, a green-gold energy flowing upward from the roots. It was strong here, near the heart of Skull's domain. But as I moved north, following the direction my map indicated, the song began to change. The vibrant green-gold threads in my mind's eye grew dull, threaded with strands of that familiar, sickly violet gray. The feeling under my fingers shifted from vibrant life to a weary, thready pulse. Leaves here were spotted with unnatural black. The air smelled faintly metallic, like old blood and ozone. My heart clenched. Seeing it on a map was one thing. Feeling the land's illness was a physical ache in my own spirit. This was a wound, a deliberate poisoning. I reached the area I had marked. It was a place where the ridge's stone dipped down to meet the dense forest, forming a narrow, shadowy gully. A small, clear stream usually trickled through it. Now the water ran sluggish and murky. The moss on the rocks was dead and brittle. This was the entry point, the ground zero of the blight. Kneeling by the polluted stream, I placed both hands on the damp earth. I breathed deeply, trying to quiet my own horror to become a clear channel. I reached for that connection to Skull, for the resonance of the mountain. Show me, I pleaded silently into the bond we shared. The whisper in my void responded. It was a surge of focused attention, a beam of ancient awareness directed through me and into the ground. My senses plunged downward. I didn't see with my eyes, I felt. I felt the paths of the poison, thin, invasive tendrils seeping through the soil and bedrock, following ley lines and water tables, seeking the heart of the ridge. And I felt their origin, not a natural seep, a point of violent intrusion. Here, right where I knelt, something had been driven into the earth, a focus for the corruption. I opened my eyes, scraping at the mud and dead moss with my fingers. The soil was cold, unnaturally so. I dug deeper, my nails breaking against stone. Then my fingertips brushed something smooth and metallic. My blood ran cold. I cleared the mud away. It was a disc about the size of my palm, made of the same dark iron as the shard. Etched into its surface was a complex, spiraling sigil that seemed to writhe when I looked at it directly. It was pulsing faintly, a slow, sick heartbeat pumping poison into the land, an anchor. This was no lost weapon. This was a deliberately planted device. Sorcery. A wave of nausea and fury washed over me. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. The attack on Skull was just one part of a larger, more insidious plan. They were poisoning the land at its root. I knew I shouldn't touch it. The shard had been bad enough. This focused anchor would be worse, but I had to try. I had to see if I could counteract it, even a little. I centered myself, drawing on the memory of the Starmoss cavern, on the clean song of living stone. I called to the resonance within me, to the silver light I barely understood. I held my hands over the dark iron disk, not touching it, pouring every ounce of will into pushing back the corruption. A faint, silvery nimbus flickered around my fingers. The violet pulse of the disk dimmed, and for a moment the metallic stench in the air lessened. A tiny patch of dead moss near the edge of my light seemed to gasp, a hint of green returning to its center, but the effort was immense. It was like trying to hold back the tide with my bare hands. Sweat beaded on my brow, and a sharp, ice-pick headache began to pound behind my eyes. The disk resisted, its malevolent energy pushing back, cold and hateful. It was linked to something or someone powerful. I couldn't sustain it. With a gasp, I broke the connection, pulling my hands back. The silver light vanished. The disk pulsed once, strongly, as if in triumph, and the blight seemed to creep back over the tiny spot of green. I slumped back, panting, my energy spent. I couldn't destroy it, not alone. Not yet, but I knew what it was now, and knowledge was a weapon. I carefully recovered the disk with mud and dead foliage, marking the spot with a subtle arrangement of 3 pale stones. I needed to report this immediately. As I stood, a new sensation prickled at the edge of my awareness, not through the land but through my own human ears. A sound, the careful snap of a twig, the rustle of undergrowth, too deliberate to be an animal. I wasn't alone. I froze, melting back against the trunk of a large, blighted oak, my breath held. My senses, still heightened from connecting with the land, strained. I caught a scent on the faint breeze, not pack, not wolf at all. It was cold, dry, and acrid, like ash and charged metal. And beneath it, the faint, coppery tang of blood. 2 figures emerged from the trees downstream, moving with a predatory grace that was all wrong. They were clad in dark, fitted leathers that seemed to drink the light. Their hoods were up, but I saw the glint of eyes and the pale lower half of a face on the lead figure. A man. He held a strange, curved blade that also looked to be made of dark iron. They were checking their poison source. My blood turned to ice. These were the attackers. They had returned. The lead figure knelt by the stream, his head cocked. He placed a hand on the ground, right near where I had buried the disk. He went utterly still. "It's been disturbed," he said, his voice a dry rasp that raised the hairs on my arms. Recently, the resonance was challenged. His companion, taller and broader, scanned the gully, hand on his own weapon. The guardian, no, the challenge was small, faintly luminous, a different signature. The kneeling man stood, his hood turning slowly, methodically, scanning the trees. A cleaner, a would-be healer, they're here or they were. His gaze swept past my oak, paused, and moved on. I didn't dare breathe. I poured every instinct into being a stone, a shadow, a part of the sick land itself. "Search the area," the raspy voice commanded. "If it's a lone scout, eliminate it. We cannot have our work discovered." The taller one nodded and began to move silently up the gully toward my position. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. I was no warrior. I was a whisperer, a feeler. I had nowhere to run that they wouldn't hear. My only advantage was that I knew this land, even sick, better than they did, and I had one other ally. As the hunter crept closer, his ashen metal scent filling my nostrils, I did the only thing I could. I slammed my will against the bond I shared with Skull, not with a gentle question, but with a blast of raw, unvarnished terror. "Danger, enemy, here." The response was instantaneous. The whisper in my void didn't just thrum, it roared. A psychic shout of fury that echoed in my skull, and from the heart of the ridge, miles away but feeling impossibly close, a physical roar answered it. It was the sound of a mountain coming alive, furious and protective. The ground beneath my feet trembled. The dark hunter below me stumbled, looking toward the ridge in shock. "What?" He never finished. From the trees above me, a shadow darker than any forest shade detached itself and fell. Not Skull, he was too large, too far. This was a massive, ordinary timber wolf, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural golden light. It was driven by Skull's will, a piece of his fury made flesh. It slammed into the hunter, jaws closing on his weapon arm. There was a crunch, a scream cut short. The lead figure by the stream didn't hesitate. He took one look at his falling comrade, at the enraged proxy wolf, and at the still trembling earth. He made a sharp, slicing gesture with his hand, and a cloud of inky darkness erupted around him. When it cleared a second later, he was gone. The remaining hunter was swiftly subdued by the wolf, which then stood over him, growling, pinning him down. It looked at me, its skull-borrowed eyes holding a command, "Come." Shaking, I stepped out from behind the tree. I approached the captured man. His hood had fallen back, revealing a face marked with strange, ritual scars and eyes that held a fanatical gleam even in defeat. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling but loud. "Who sent you?" He just smiled, a bloody, defiant twist of his lips. "The reaving is coming, little healer. The silent earth will rise. You and your pet mountain cannot stop it." Then he convulsed, his eyes rolling back. A black fluid seeped from the corner of his mouth. He'd taken a poison capsule. In moments, he was dead. The proxy wolf nudged the body, then looked at me. The golden light faded from its eyes, and it shook its head, blinking, confused, before darting back into the forest. I stood alone in the blighted gully with a corpse and a buried weapon of sorcery, the words echoing in my mind. The reaving is coming. The hidden enemy had a name, and they had seen me. I ran. I ran from the gully, from the corpse, from the pulsing anchor of dark iron, with the echo of the dead hunter's words chasing me like a phantom. The reaving, the very sound of it was a blight on the tongue. My mind raced faster than my feet. They had seen the effect of my power, called it luminous. They knew someone was pushing back, and they would be back in force. I didn't go to my cottage. I went straight to the Alpha's lodge, bursting past the startled guards into the strategy room where, by some fortunate alignment of the moon, the same council was still convened. I must have been a wild sight, mud-streaked, pale, breathing raggedly, my eyes wide with the horror of what I'd witnessed. All conversation ceased. Ilara, my mother, rose from her seat, concern erasing her regal composure. "They're here," I gasped, bracing my hands on the carved table. My map was still there. I stabbed a finger at the marked gully. "The enemy, they call themselves the Reaving." I found their weapon, an anchor of dark iron, buried, poisoning the land. They came to check on it. I was there. I spilled the story in a frantic rush. The discovered disc, my failed attempt to cleanse it, the two hunters, the ashen metal scent, the attack by the skull-possessed wolf, the capture, the suicide, the final warning. A grim, heavy silence settled over the room. The theoretical threat had just become violently, fatally real. "You are certain of the name, the Reaving?" Alpha Arcturus's voice was like gravel. "That's what he said. The reaving is coming. The silent earth will rise." Elder Nara paled. "The silent earth, it's an old term, a wasteland. A place where all natural magic is dead, leaving only void or something that feeds on void. They are creating a beachhead of silent earth on our border," I said, the pieces clicking into a terrible whole. "They poison the land, which weakens Skal, the guardian. Once he falls, the blight spreads unchecked. They walk in on dead ground, and they have sorcerers. The one who escaped, he vanished into darkness." Kieran, his face set in grim lines, spoke up. "A prisoner would have been valuable. But a corpse and a name are more than we had an hour ago." He looked at me, and there was no skepticism now, only the cold calculation of a soldier. "Can you show us this anchor?" I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. "But we must be careful. It's actively corrupting the area, and they know it's been discovered." "Then we move now," my father declared, rising to his full height, his alpha aura filling the room with a commanding pressure. "Kieran, gather your 10 best trackers and warriors. Stealth is secondary to speed and strength now. Nara, consult the oldest lore, find any reference to the reaving in the archives. Selene, prepare the pack, quietly. We are not at war yet, but we are on a knife's edge." He turned to me. "Ilara, you will lead us to the site, and you will do what you did before, attempt to connect to the land to sense any other such anchors, any approaching threats. You are our guide in this poisoned wood." It was an order, but also an acknowledgement. I was no longer just reporting, I was leading the war party. Within the hour, we were moving. Kieran, his arm still in a sling but his presence fierce, led a group of 9 hardened warriors, all in wolf form except for him and me. I rode on the back of a sturdy beta named Garen, his gray fur thick and strong. The urgency was a tangible force among us. We approached the gully with extreme caution, the warriors fanning out, noses testing the corrupted air. The scene was as I left it, the dead hunter, the bleakness, the metallic stink. At my direction, they uncovered the dark iron disc. A collective growl rose from the warriors at the sight and feel of it. The palpable malevolence made their hackles rise. "Do not touch it," I warned. "Its poison is more than physical." While Kieran and the others secured the perimeter, examining the corpse and the signs of struggle, I moved to the center of the blighted area. I closed my eyes, kneeling, pressing my palms to the cold earth. I reached for Skal for the mountain's song. I have brought others I sent along the bond, a mixture of apology and necessity. The enemy is named, they plant anchors, help me find them. The response was a wave of focused energy, less furious than before, more strategic. It felt like a great lens focusing through me. My awareness expanded again, shooting through the poisoned ley lines. This time I wasn't just feeling the one source, I was tracing the network. There were others, 3 more. Each one a festering node of silent earth creation, forming a rough crescent along the northern border of Skal's territory, pushing inward. I saw their locations in my mind as clearly as if they were marked on my map, but I also felt something new. A vibration along the lines connecting the anchors, a stirring, like spiders feeling tremors in their web. The reeving knew we were here, they were alerted. I snapped my eyes open. There are 3 more, to the northeast, the north, and the northwest. They form a line. And they know we're here, the network is awake. Kieran was at my side instantly. "Can you tell how many? Are they moving?" I focused again, but the information was murky. The anchors pulsed with defensive energy now, clouding the connections. "I can't tell numbers." "But the poison, it's flowing faster. They're accelerating the process." "Then we have no time," Kieran said, turning to his warriors. "We split, 3 groups. Find these anchors, mark them. Do not engage unless forced. Our priority is intelligence. We meet back at the watchtower by moonrise. Move." The teams dissolved into the trees with disciplined silence. Kieran, Garen, and 1 other warrior remained with me. "We'll check the closest one," Kieran said. "You guide." We moved swiftly. The forest grew quieter, deader, as we neared the next location, a dank hollow around a stagnant pool. The anchor was here, submerged in the pool's center, turning the water viscous and black. The corruption was more advanced here, the trees were skeletal and the air was thin and cold. As we surveyed the grim sight, a new sound reached us. Not from the land, but from the east. A sharp, truncated howl of alarm cut off suddenly. Then the sound of clashing forces, snarls, the ring of metal on metal, a cry of pain. "The northeast team," Kieran breathed, his face going white. "They're under attack." He didn't hesitate. To them, now, we ran, a desperate sprint through the dying woods. The sounds of battle grew louder, the guttural shouts of men, the enraged snarls of wolves, and that chilling, dry rasp of reeving sorcery. We burst into a small clearing. The scene was chaos. 3 of our warriors in wolf form were locked in combat with 5 reeving soldiers. 2 wolves were already down, unmoving. The reeving fought with brutal efficiency, their dark iron blades leaving smoking wounds. And in the center of it all stood a figure I recognized, the hooded leader who had escaped me. He was chanting, his hands weaving patterns in the air that left trails of violet afterimage. Where his gestures pointed, the very shadows seemed to come alive, grasping at the wolves like solid hands. One of our warriors, a young black-furred wolf, was pinned by 2 such shadow tendrils. The reeving leader raised his blade for a finishing strike. "No," the roar came from Kieran. He shifted in mid-sprint, a flash of light and coalescing muscle. His silver wolf form, though one foreleg was still tender, launched itself across the clearing in a breathtaking arc. he slammed into the reaving sorcerer, knocking the blade aside and taking the man to the ground. The distraction was enough. The captured wolf broke free. Garen and the other warrior plunged into the fray. I stood at the clearing's edge, weaponless, power buzzing uselessly in my veins. I couldn't fight like them. But I could feel the land screaming in pain from the conflict, from the dark iron, from the death. I dropped to my knees, my hands slamming into the leaf litter. I didn't try to heal, I tried to amplify. I poured my will, my connection to Skal, into the land itself, not to cleanse but to awaken. Help them, I screamed silently into the earth. The ground shuddered, roots erupted from the soil, not violently but with purpose. They twined around the ankles of two reaving soldiers, yanking them off balance. A low branch of a great oak swung down like a club, batting a blade from another's hand. The reaving soldiers faltered, spooked by the seemingly sentient forest. It was the opening our warriors needed. Garen seized a throat. Kieran, atop the sorcerer, had his jaws at the man's neck. The sorcerer laughed, a rasping, bloody sound. You think this matters, the anchors are set, the reaving comes, you cannot stop the silent tide. His hand shot out, not toward Kieran, but toward the center of the clearing where the fighting was thickest. He uttered a single, guttural word. The dark iron dagger on the ground beside him exploded in a silent concussion of violet-black energy. The wave of force threw everyone back. I was flung against a tree, my vision swimming. When it cleared, the clearing was a scene of carnage. Our remaining warriors were stunned, wounded. The reaving soldiers were regrouping, dragging their fallen, and the sorcerer, bleeding from Kieran's bite, was crawling toward the trees, weaving another darkness cloak. Kieran struggled to his feet, shaking his head. He saw the escaping leader. He gathered his haunches to spring. "Kieran, do," I cried, a terrible premonition seizing me. It was too late. Kieran leaped. As he did, the sorcerer flung a handful of black dust over his shoulder. It wasn't aimed at Kieran, it was aimed at the space between them. Kieran passed through the cloud. He landed, stumbling on the other side. The sorcerer vanished into the shadows. Kieran took 2 steps back toward us, then faltered. He shifted back to human form, collapsing to his knees. His face was ashen. He clutched his chest, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. Where the dust had touched his skin, angry black veins were already spreading, crawling toward his heart. A slow, insidious poison, not meant to kill instantly but to claim. I scrambled to him, skidding in the leaves. Kieran, his eyes met mine, wide with pain and shock. "Ilara, it's cold." The surviving warriors formed a protective circle around us, growling at the retreating reaving. But the battle was over. We had driven them off at a terrible cost. And they had taken my brother with them, not in body but in spirit. The black veins pulsed under his skin, a map of a different kind of blight. The reaving's warning echoed in the sudden, grim silence of the clearing. The silent earth will rise. And it had begun by claiming the Alpha Heir's heart. The world narrowed to the black veins spidering across Kieran's chest, to the rasp of his struggling breath. The warriors moved with grim efficiency, fashioning a litter from spears and cloaks. Garen, a gash across his shoulder still smoking from dark iron, took command with a low growl. "Move, to the healers, now." I ran beside the litter, one hand on my brother's icy wrist, the other pressed to my own churning stomach. The forest blurred into a smear of dying greens and oppressive grays. The echo of the battle, the sorcerer's laugh, the silent explosion, the look in Kieran's eyes replayed on a loop in my mind. This was my fault. I had led them there. My discovery had triggered this. The whisper in my void was a constant, distressed thrum, Skal's presence agitated by the violence and the spreading poison. I could feel his frustration, his vast power useless against this subtle, invasive venom so far from his heartland. We burst into the pact settlement, a grim procession that silenced the midday bustle. Shouts went up, healers came running. My father and mother met us at the doors of the healing lodge, their faces etching with fresh horror as they saw their heir, pallid and shivering, the dark curse marring his skin. What happened? Alpha Arcturus's voice was dangerously quiet. Reaving ambush, Garen reported, laying the litter down gently. A sorcerer used some kind of blight dust. The Alphair took the full brunt of it. The head healer, an older beta named Yana, pushed forward. She examined Kieran, her skilled hands hovering over the black veins. She pressed a cleansed silver dagger to his skin, the metal instantly tarnished, turning a dull gray. She paled. This is no natural poison, it's concentrated silent earth corruption, it's attacking his life force, his connection to the pack and the moon. Can you treat it? Luna Selene asked, her voice trembling. Yana's face was a mask of professional despair. We can slow it, poultices of moon-blessed herbs, silver filigree channeling, but to cure it, we would need the source of the blight itself reversed. Or a power of pure, living earth strong enough to burn the corruption out. Her eyes flicked to me, then away. Our magic is of the pack, this is something else. The implication hung in the air, pack magic couldn't cure it. But maybe the magic of the mountain could. My father's gaze found me heavy with a desperate hope. Ilara, your connection to the land, to Skal, can it? All eyes turned to me, the stained Omega, the beast whisperer, now the only possible hope for the Alphair. I looked at Kieran, his proud face now slack with pain. I remembered his grudging thanks in my cottage, his vow to fight when I found the source. He had fought and he had fallen. I don't know, I whispered, the confession agony. I can feel the land's pain. I can push back blight in a small way, but this is inside him, it's woven into his spirit. You must try, my mother said, and it was not a command from the Luna, but a plea from a mother. Her hand found mine, squeezing tightly. Please, Ilara. The weight was crushing. I nodded, a jerky, terrified motion. I need to be alone with him, and I need to be near the earth, not here on stone floors, outside, in a place where the land is still clean. They didn't question it. A sheltered grove behind the healing lodge was prepared, a bed of fresh, sweet-smelling peat and moss laid down. Kieran was carried there. The healers withdrew to a respectful distance, though Yana stayed close, watching with sharp, analytical eyes. My parents stood at the edge of the grove, a united front of silent, terrified support. I knelt beside my brother in the soft moss. The sun dappled through the leaves, but it felt distant, cold. I placed my hands on his chest over the worst of the black veins. His skin was like marble left in a stream, cold and unnaturally smooth. I closed my eyes. I blocked out the sounds, the worried whispers, the weight of expectation. I sank into the void within me, not empty now, but filled with the complex humming song of Skal and the mountain. I reached for it not to pull it into me, but to let it flow through me. Help me, I prayed along the bond, not for the pack, for him. He fights for the land now, too. The response was immediate but different. Not a surge of power, but a shift in perspective. Skal's consciousness brushed against mine, and suddenly I wasn't just seeing the black veins, I was perceiving the poison. It was a network of hollow, hungry threads, sucking the green-gold light of Kieran's life force, replacing it with silent, static gray. It was a microcosm of the blight in the land, and I saw something else. A tiny, stubborn spark of silver-blue light deep in Kieran's core, his will, his alpha spirit. It was guttering, surrounded but not yet extinguished. I had no idea what I was doing. I simply acted on instinct. I imagined my own awareness as those same silver filaments I'd conjured before. Not to push, but to connect. To weave a bridge between that dying spark inside Kieran and the vast, roaring furnace of living earth energy that was Skal's domain. It was like trying to thread a needle during an earthquake. The poison was active, defensive. It recoiled from my silver light, lashing out with jolts of nullifying cold that shot pain up my arms. I gritted my teeth, a soft whimper escaping me. I felt my own energy draining, being siphoned by the struggle, but I held on. I was a conduit. I let the mountain's song flow into me, a river of green and gold and deep, resonant brown. I focused it into a single, delicate point of light and pushed it toward Kieran's spark. Live, I poured into the connection along with the mountain's power. Fight, the land needs your strength. The spark flickered, then flared. It wasn't a miraculous healing. The black veins didn't vanish. But their advance halted. The gray static around the spark receded just a hair. Kieran's breathing, which had been shallow and rapid, deepened. A tinge of color returned to his lips. The effort exhausted me. I broke the connection, swaying, my hands falling from his chest. I would have collapsed if Yana hadn't darted forward to steady me. By the moon, the healer breathed, staring at Kieran's chest. The corruption, it stopped spreading. She looked at me with something akin to awe. What did you do? I connected him, I panted, sweat cooling on my brow. To the living land, it's not a cure, it's a lifeline. The poison is still there, it's a stalemate. Alpha Arcturus approached, his eyes on his son's now peaceful face. How long can you maintain this? That was the terrible question. I felt hollowed out. I don't know, minutes, an hour, it takes everything I have, and it only holds it back. To purge it, I looked up at him, despair creeping in. We need to destroy the source, the anchors, all of them. And the one who cast this poison. My father's face hardened into the mask of the Alpha. He looked from Kieran to me, to the warriors standing grimly by. Then that is what we will do. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. You have bought us time, now we must use it. You will rest, then you will show us every anchor, and we will rip this silent earth from our territory root and stem. He turned to Garen. Call the full war council, every warrior, every elder. We are at war with the Reaving. As they moved away, a flurry of purposeful activity, I stayed on the moss beside Kieran. My mother knelt next to me, brushing hair from my forehead. You saved his life, Alara, for now. It's not enough, I murmured, watching the black veins, dormant but still present like cracks in porcelain. It is the first step, she said firmly. Then her voice dropped for my ears only. This power of yours, it is not of the pack, it is older, wilder. It frightened some of the elders, but it has saved my son, remember that. No matter what they say, you are my daughter and you are doing what no one else can. She kissed my forehead and rose to join my father, leaving me with my sleeping brother and the whispering void. The thrum in my mind was steady, approving. I had used our bond not just as a sense, but as a channel. It had worked, but at a cost. I felt the distance between Skal and me lessening, the bond thickening, becoming more tangible. It was no longer just an echo, it was a shared heartbeat. Kieran's eyelids fluttered. He didn't wake fully, but his hand twitched. I took it in mine. It was warmer. Hear me, brother, I whispered, leaning close. You have to hold on. I've given you a tether to the mountain. Cling to it. We're going to burn the poison out. I swear it. His fingers tightened around mine just for a second, a promise. In that quiet grove, with the pack mobilizing for war around me, I made my own vow. Not just to my brother, but to the ancient wolf in the mountain, and to the land that had sung to me. The Reaving wanted silent earth. They would find instead a storm of living stone and a girl with stars in her soul, ready to fight for every blade of grass. They gave me one night to rest. Sleep was a fractured thing, filled with visions of black veins spreading like cracks across a map, of rasping laughter, and of Skal's golden eyes watching from a starlit cavern. I woke at dawn feeling brittle, but the deep, resonant thrum in my core was stronger, as if the effort of channeling had deepened the well of connection. The War Council was a somber, electric gathering in the main lodge. Every able-bodied warrior was present, along with the elders. The air smelled of steel, leather, and grim resolve. Alpha Arcturus stood before the carved map, now updated with 4 marked locations, the anchors I had sensed. The Reaving seeks to poison our land, to kill its guardian, and to walk in on dead ground, my father's voice rang out, clear and cold. They have wounded my son with their coward sorcery. This is not a challenge, it is an extermination. We will meet it with full force. He laid out the plan. 4 strike teams, each led by a senior alpha or beta, would hit the anchor sites simultaneously at high noon when the sun's power was greatest. Their orders: destroy the anchors by any means necessary. Isolate, shatter, burn. My role was to go with the central team to the original gully, to use my connection to ensure the anchor was truly destroyed, and to sense any retaliation or hidden traps. Ilara is our key, my father stated, and the room's attention focused on me, a mixture of respect, wariness, and desperate hope. She sees what we cannot, heed her warnings. Kieran's second, a fierce female alpha named Talia, would lead the main team. She gave me a curt, respectful nod. There was no pity in her eyes, only the assessment of a fellow weapon. As the teams finalized their compositions, I slipped away. I needed a moment of clarity, and there was only one place to get it. I headed for the ridge, not the poisoned borders, but Skull's cavern. I needed to speak to him, not as a conduit, but as an ally. We were going to war for his home, and he needed to know. The climb was easier now, my body familiar with the path. The cavern welcomed me with its cool, star-moss breath. Skull was waiting, lying in the center, his head raised. His golden eyes held a gravity I'd never seen before. "We attack today," I said aloud, my voice echoing softly. "We're going to destroy their anchors." A low rumble of acknowledgement. He already knew. The land had told him. I walked closer, sitting on the moss before him. The poison in my brother, it's tied to the anchors, to the sorcerer who placed them. Destroying them might weaken it, but I don't think it will break it, not fully. Skull huffed, a warm breath, then he did something extraordinary. He lowered his head until his massive forehead was level with my chest, an invitation. Hesitantly, I placed my hands on the thick fur between his eyes. The moment I did, the connection didn't just open, it exploded. This wasn't sharing images or sensations. This was a merging of awareness. I was no longer just Ilara. I was also the ridge, the deep roots, the patient stone, the ancient, vast consciousness that was Skull. I felt the 4 weeping wounds of the anchors like burns on my own skin. I felt the creeping fatigue of fighting the poison for so long. And I felt his immense, weary power, coiled and ready, but constrained by the need to hold the central land together to keep the heart from failing. In that merged state, I understood. Skull wasn't just a guardian. He was the genius loci, the spirit of the place. His physical form was just a manifestation. The mountain was his body. The poison was slowly paralyzing him, and I saw something else. A memory, not his, but the land's. Centuries ago, when the packs were young, there had been a pact, not of dominance, but of mutual respect. The first alpha of the Silvermane had not tried to ride Skull. He had stood before him and promised to hunt the valleys to keep the balance in exchange for Skull's guardianship of the high places. They had been partners. That pact had been forgotten, warped into a tale of conquest by generations of alphas who valued strength over symbiosis. The realization was a shock that reverberated through our joined minds. "You remember the true pact," Skull's thought came, not in words, but in pure concept. "And they have forgotten," I thought back, grief for the lost understanding washing through me. "You are the bridge," came his response, "the empty one who can hold the old song. You have begun to remind them." The merger receded, leaving me gasping, my hands still on his fur, my mind reeling. The scale of it, the history, the responsibility, it was dizzying. "Today we fight to remove the sickness," I whispered, my voice raw, "but after we must remind them of the pact. We must restore the balance." Skull lifted his head, looking down at me. In his eyes I saw the reflection of eons and a flicker of something that might have been hope. He nudged me gently with his nose, then turned and paced to the back of the cavern. He nosed at a pile of ordinary-looking stones, pushing one aside to reveal a space beneath. From it, he drew out an object with his teeth, laying it carefully at my feet. It was a torque, a neck ring of ancient design. It was made of a braid of 3 metals, silver like moonlight, iron the gray of mountain mist, and a third, unfamiliar metal that shone with a soft, deep blue gleam, like a summer night sky. It was simple, powerful, and thrummed with an energy that harmonized perfectly with the song in my soul. For the bridge, the thought floated to me. For the alpha of the old pact, my breath caught. I'm not an alpha. You are the link, the conduit. You speak for the land and you are of the pack. That is the heart of the pact. Wear it. Let the land's strength flow through you openly today. With trembling hands I picked up the torque. It was cool but not cold. It felt right. I lifted it and clasped it around my neck. It settled against my collarbones with a comforting weight. The moment it touched my skin, the whisper in my void became a clear, strong chord. The connection was no longer internal, it was manifest, stabilized. I felt grounded, amplified. Skull gave a satisfied rumble. Go, heal the wounds, I will hold the heart steady, and when the time comes, I will fight. I left the cavern a different person than I entered. I was no longer just Alara the Stained, or even Alara the Beast Whisperer. I was Alara the bridge, and the ancient torque around my neck was a testament to a forgotten promise I now had to fulfill. I returned to the gathering point as the teams were making final preparations. My appearance, the ancient, gleaming torque obvious against my simple tunic, caused a stir. Murmurs rippled through the warriors. My father's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in assessment. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Talia looked from the torque to my face. What is that? A tool, I said, my voice carrying a new authority that surprised even me. From the Guardian. It will help me cleanse the poison. Let's move, the sun won't wait. We moved out, a silent, lethal river flowing into the blighted woods. The atmosphere was tense, every sense alert for ambush. As we neared the gully, the familiar sickness pressed on my senses, but the torque pulsed warmly, pushing back the discomfort, keeping my mind clear. The gully was deserted, but the dark iron disc pulsed with a frantic, defensive energy, as if it knew its end was near. The air crackled with static. There, I pointed, beneath the marked stones. Talia nodded. Two warriors with heavy, silver-headed mauls stepped forward. Silver was purifying, disruptive to dark magic. Wait, I said, stepping forward. I knelt before the spot. I placed my hands on the ground, the torque cool against my throat. This time I didn't just feel the poison. I understood its structure, its weak points, thanks to the merged awareness with Skull. It was a knot of negative energy, tied to the other anchors and to its creator. I am going to try to unravel its connection first, I told Talia. It might lash out, be ready. I closed my eyes, drawing on the chord of the torque, on the mountain's song. I directed my will not at the anchor itself, but at the threads of energy linking it to its siblings and to the sorcerer. I imagined my silver-blue light as a scalpel, severing those threads with precise, sharp cuts. A high-pitched psychic shriek echoed through the gully, felt rather than heard. The disc violet light flared wildly. The ground trembled. Now, I shouted. The warriors swung their mauls. The silver head struck the uncovered disc with a thunderous clang, and the world erupted, not in an explosion of force, but in a geyser of corrupted energy. Black and violet tendrils of pure silent earth power shot upward, coalescing into a shrieking, formless wraith of blight. It lashed out at the nearest warrior, who screamed as his armor corroded and his skin grayed on contact. The anchor was destroyed, but it had released its stored poison as a final weapon. Talia roared, shifting into her sleek, powerful wolf form and leaping at the wraith, her jaws snapping through its insubstantial form to little effect. I stared, horror-struck. This was a new manifestation, a guardian of the blight. Then the torque blazed with light. The blue metal shone like a captured star, the silver like a moonbeam, the iron like solid stone. The chord in my mind became a command. I didn't think, I acted. I raised my hands, and the light from the torque shot down my arms, bursting from my palms not as a gentle glow, but as a beam of concentrated, living earth energy, green, gold, and silver intertwined. It struck the blight wraith. The thing shrieked, a sound of ultimate negation meeting ultimate life. Where my light touched it, it unraveled, dissolving into harmless smoke that was swiftly scattered by a sudden, clean wind that smelled of pine and high mountain snow. Silence fell, heavy and stunned. The warrior who was struck was on the ground, but the graying on his skin was receding slowly. The direct beam of the land's power had countered it. All eyes were on me, on the fading light around my hands, on the torque that still gleamed with an inner fire. Talia shifted back, staring at me with undisguised awe. By the old gods, a series of distant, echoing booms rolled across the forest from the north, east, and west. Flashes of light, some sickly violet, some brilliant silver or gold, lit the horizon. The other teams were engaged. The battle for the land was joined. I looked down at the shattered remains of the dark iron disc, now inert. One wound was cauterized. I raised my head, the torque warm and sure against my skin. "One down," I said, my voice ringing with the mountain's certainty. "Report the others." We moved to reinforce where needed. The reaving had wanted a silent earth. They had awakened a roaring mountain instead. The reports came in swift and bloody. Two of the other strike teams had succeeded, destroying their anchors after fierce skirmishes with reaving guards. They'd faced blight wraiths too, lesser than mine, and had taken casualties, but prevailed with a combination of silver weapons and raw pack force will. The third team, the one sent to the northwestern anchor, the most remote and likely the strongest, had gone silent. "No runners, no signals," Talia reported, her face grim as we gathered at a central rally point. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long, worried shadows. "We must assume they are pinned down or worse." My father, who had joined us with a reserve force, clenched his jaw. "We cannot leave them. That anchor must fall. If one remains, the network may regenerate." He looked at me. "Ilara, can you sense the anchor? Is it still active?" I closed my eyes, touching the torque. I cast my awareness northwest, following the sickly threads. One thread where the gully anchor had been was severed and fading. Two others were snapped, but the fourth, it thrummed with a strong, defiant pulse. And around it I felt the chaotic energy of conflict, the sharp, hot sparks of pack warriors and the cold, hungry voids of reaving fighters. "It's still there," I confirmed, opening my eyes, "and there's a battle raging around it. Our people are alive but surrounded. The reaving are defending it heavily." "Then we break the siege," Alpha Arcturus said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Talia, reform the central and eastern teams." "We march as one, Ilara with me. Your light is our best weapon against their corruption." The march to the northwestern site was a forced run through increasingly dead forest. The blight here was advanced. Trees were bare skeletons, the ground was hard and cracked, and a chilling silence reigned, broken only by the sound of our movement and the distant, occasional clash of metal. The very air stole hope. We found the battle in a wide, rocky basin. The anchor was here, placed on a natural stone altar, pulsing like a diseased heart. Around it, a ring of perhaps 15 reaving soldiers fought with disciplined ferocity, using curved dark iron blades and small, thrown capsules that released clouds of weakening gray mist. Our warriors, 8 of them left, were backed against a cliff face, fighting in a desperate, shrinking circle. 3 bodies in silvermane colors lay still on the ground. Seeing them, a cold rage settled over me. It was different from Skal's fiery wrath. It was a deep, glacial fury. This was my land too now, and they were killing my pack. "Attack!" my father roared, and our reinforced force, over 30 strong, poured into the basin with a deafening chorus of snarls and war cries. The reaving line buckled but didn't break. They fought with the fanatical desperation of those protecting their last key. I stayed near my father, Talia at my other side. A reaving soldier lunged at me. Talia intercepted him, her wolf form a blur of fangs and fury. My role was clear. I focused on the anchor. I pushed through the chaos, the torque blazing a path, its light pushing back the gray mists. The reaving sorcerer leading this group, a different one from before, a woman with white scars across her cheeks, saw me coming. Her eyes widened at the sight of the torque. She shrieked a command, and 3 soldiers disengaged to block me. "Protect the bridge," my father commanded, and a wedge of our warriors slammed into the 3, creating an opening. I ran for the stone altar. The sorceress was ready, her hands weaving a complex pattern. A wall of seething black thorns, seemingly made of solidified shadow and rust, erupted from the ground between me and the anchor. I didn't stop. I raised my hands and the living light shot forth. Where it met the shadow thorns, they hissed and dissolved, but slowly. She was powerful. The anchor behind her pulsed, feeding her strength. I was straining, the energy pouring from the torque and through me. I could feel Skal, distant but pouring his will into our bond, into the torque, fueling me. It was still a stalemate. Then a new sound cut through the din of battle, a deep, rhythmic thump like a giant heartbeat, then another, and another. The ground began to shake in earnest, not the tremor of a passing awareness, but the steady, earth-shaking footfalls of something colossal approaching. Every fighter, pack and reaving alike, faltered, looking toward the northern edge of the basin. He emerged from the dead tree line, and the world seemed to shrink around him. Skal, he had come, not as a distant presence, not through a proxy, but in all his terrible, magnificent physicality. Storm-gray fur bristling, molten gold eyes burning with focused fury, each paw the size of a cartwheel. He was the mountain, walking. The reaving sorceress's concentration shattered, her wall of thorns wavered. The guardian, it leaves its heart, it cannot, but he had, for the final wound. For the pack fighting for his land. Skal opened his maw and roared. It was the sound of avalanches and thunderstorms given voice. It was a physical force that knocked reaving soldiers from their feet and made our own warriors brace. It was a declaration of sovereignty. He didn't charge into the mass of fighters. He strode purposefully toward the stone altar, toward the sorceress and the anchor. Arrows and dark iron blades bounced harmlessly off his hide. A soldier who stood too close was batted aside like a gnat. The sorceress, screaming in defiance, gathered all her power and hurled a concentrated bolt of silent earth energy at him, a spear of pure negation. Skal didn't dodge, he took the blast on his chest. The corrupted energy crackled over him and dissipated. It was a drop of poison in an ocean. He was the living land. This concentrated blight could not unmake him here at the source of his strength. He lowered his head and breathed on the anchor. It wasn't fire. It was a blast of pure, concentrated life force, the opposite of silent earth. It was the essence of growing roots, of flowing springs, of enduring stone. The dark iron anchor did not shatter. It dissolved. It turned to dust, then to motes of light, then to nothing. The connection to the other anchors was already severed. This was the root, and it was gone. The sorceress gave a final, despairing wail as her source of power vanished. The remaining reaving soldiers, their purpose shattered, their courage broken, tried to flee. Capture them, Alpha Arcturus bellowed. But Skal was not done. He turned his great head, his gaze sweeping over the fleeing reaving. He lifted a paw and brought it down on the earth with a definitive crack. A ripple of power, visible like a wave of heat haze, spread out from the point of impact. It passed through the fleeing reaving. They didn't fall. They simply stopped, froze in place as if turned to statues of ash, which then crumbled a moment later into inert dust. It was the land itself rejecting them, unmade them. The basin fell utterly silent, save for the heavy panting of our warriors and the slow, settling rumble from Skal's chest. He had ended the battle in 2 breaths. He then turned his gaze to me. I stood, the light around me fading, the torque still warm. He dipped his massive head in a slow, deliberate nod. The message was clear. The pact is remembered. Then he looked at Alpha Arcturus. My father, the mighty Alpha, stood before the giant wolf, and for the first time in my life I saw him not as a leader looking at a beast, but as a man looking at a sovereign. He placed a fist over his heart and bowed, deep and respectful. Skal acknowledged him with a soft chuff. Then, his duty done, he turned and paced back into the forest, the ground trembling with his passage until the sounds faded, leaving us in the sudden, profound quiet of a cleansed land. The victory was absolute. The anchors were destroyed. The reaving force was annihilated, but as I looked at the dust that had been our enemies, at the awe and fear on my packmates' faces, and at the fading connection to the retreating guardian, I knew this wasn't the end. The reaving had a larger purpose. They had spoken of a reaving as a coming event. This was just a skirmish, a probe. We had won the battle for the ridge, but the war for the soul of the land was just beginning. And I, the bridge with the ancient torque around my neck, stood squarely in the path of the coming storm. Victory had a taste, and it was dust and blood and the sharp, clean scent of ozone left in Skal's wake. We tended to our wounded in the now silent basin. The land itself felt different. The oppressive, sucking silence was gone, replaced by a fragile, trembling stillness like a held breath. The blight was severed, but the wounds were raw. I moved among the injured, the torque warm on my neck. Where I placed my hands, the lingering traces of dark iron sickness receded faster. I was no healer of flesh, but I could encourage the land's own vitality to seep back into their bodies, speeding the natural processes. The warriors looked at me with a reverence that made my skin prickle. It was better than contempt, but it was still a barrier. I was not one of them, I was something other. My father oversaw the cleanup, his commands crisp. The ash statues of the reaving were gathered and buried far from any living stream. "We take no trophies from this foe," he declared. "Their very essence is a poison." As the teams began the solemn trek home, carrying our dead and wounded, my father fell into step beside me. He walked in silence for a long while, his eyes on the path ahead. "The torque," he said finally, his voice low, "it is of the old ways, before the alphas sought to ride, before the tales of conquest." "It is," I replied, my fingers brushing the braided metal. Skal showed me, there was a pact once, a partnership. We kept the valleys, he guarded the heights, we forgot, we tried to make him a trophy. Alpha Arcturus nodded, a weary acceptance in his eyes. "I see that now, my father, his father, they spoke only of dominance, of proving strength, we lost the wisdom." He looked at me, his gaze searching. "He gave this to you, he recognizes you. He recognizes the bridge," I corrected softly. "The one who can carry the old song because I have no other to sing. He doesn't follow me, father. He allies with me, with us. Because we fought for the land today, not just for ourselves." He absorbed this, the truth settling on his broad shoulders. "Then we must remember the pact, officially, before the pack, before the moon." He paused, "And you, Elara, your status, the Omega stain." "The stain was declared because I lacked a pack bond," I said, a new steel in my voice born from the mountain's certainty. "I have a different bond now, one that saved the Alfair and helped cleanse our borders. The law does not have a name for what I am." "So you must make one." He almost smiled, a faint, proud curve of his lips. "You speak with an alpha's clarity, daughter. Very well, we will make a new name." We returned to a pack settlement buzzing with a different energy. The news of the victory, of Skal's staggering intervention, had spread like wildfire, but so had the cost. The morning cries for the fallen echoed alongside the relieved greetings for the returned. My first stop was the healing grove. Kieran was awake. He was propped up on cushions, still pale, the black veins visible but dormant like frozen cracks in ice. His eyes, however, were clear and alert. They found the torque immediately. "Elara," he said, his voice rough but strong, "they told me the mountain walked." "It did," I said, kneeling beside him. "The anchors are gone." I placed a hand over his heart, feeling the stagnant poison, still held at bay by the slender tether of land energy I'd forged. "The source is destroyed. This should weaken." "It has," Yana the healer said, approaching with a bowl of steaming herbs. "The corruption is receding slowly. It's no longer fighting to spread, it's dying, but it is a part of him now, extracting it fully." She shook her head. "I do not know if it will ever be completely gone." Kieran met my eyes. "A scar," he said quietly, "a reminder of the enemy. I can live with that." His acceptance humbled me. The proud Alfair, marked by a poison meant to kill the land, now carried it as a testament of survival. "We will find a way," I promised. "The land's memory is long, there may be an answer in it." That evening, under a rising full moon, the entire Silvermane pack gathered in the ceremonial clearing once more. The air was thick with memory. This was where I had been stained, rejected. Now I stood beside the Alpha's dais, the torque gleaming in the moonlight. Alpha Arcturus raised his hands for silence. Pack of the Silvermane, today we fought a battle not for territory, but for existence. An enemy called the Reaving sought to poison our very earth, to kill the ancient guardian of the western ridge. They wounded my son with their foul sorcery. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the sea of faces. We prevailed, but not through strength alone. We prevailed because we remembered something we had forgotten. He turned and gestured to me. My daughter Elara, rejected by the pack bond, found a deeper bond. A bond with the living spirit of our land, with Skal, who is not a beast to be ridden but a sovereign to be respected. A murmur, but not of dissent, of awe. Skal fought with us today, my father continued, his voice swelling. He remembered an ancient pact, one of mutual protection, and he has chosen a bridge between his power and ours. He looked at me. Elara stepped forward. I did, my heart pounding against the cool metal of the torque. The title Omega-stained is hereby revoked, Alpha Arcturus proclaimed, his voice ringing in the night. It is erased. In its place we acknowledge a new designation, one for a wolf who stands between worlds. Henceforth you shall be known as the Land Speaker. Your voice carries the weight of the mountain and the pack. You are the heart of the renewed pact. He placed his hands on my shoulders, and for the first time since my childhood I felt the deliberate, powerful pulse of the Alpha's blessing, not through a bond but through touch, through intention. The pack erupted in a howl of approval, a sound that was not a psychic link but a physical wave of acceptance that washed over me. It was enough. As the howls subsided, my father spoke again. The Reaving is wounded but not defeated. Their purpose is larger than 4 anchors. We must be vigilant. We must strengthen our bonds with each other and with the land. The pact is renewed. We are Silvermane, and we are not alone. The celebration that followed was tempered by loss but brightened by a newfound unity. I was no longer a ghost at the edge. I was pulled into conversations, warriors asking respectful questions, elders nodding thoughtfully at the torque. Lyra found me, her eyes shining. Land Speaker, she said, squeezing my hand, it suits you. Later, I escaped to a quiet spot overlooking the settlement. The moon painted the world in silver. I touched the torque and reached out. Thank you, I sent along the bond, now clearer and stronger than ever. The response was a wave of serene satisfaction, like a great cat purring. An image came, the Starmoss cavern, waiting, an open invitation. Soon, I promised, there is much to do. Another image, sharper, a landscape seen from a great height, not our territory. A distant, jagged range of mountains, utterly barren, gleaming under the moon like bleached bones, a place of profound silence. A strong sense of warning emanated from it. Their source, Skal's thought impression came, the heart of the silent earth. The Reaving comes from there, my blood chilled. This was the enemy's homeland, a place where the land was already dead. That was what they wanted to spread. The image faded, replaced by a simpler one, the 4 of us, me, my father, my mother, Kieran, standing together before his cavern. A sense of necessity, a council, not of pack alone but of the pact. I understood. The battle was over. The war council was just beginning. We had won our first victory. We had reclaimed an ancient alliance. Now we had to plan how to take the fight to the very heart of the silence before it could spread and consume everything we loved. And I, the Land Speaker, would have to lead the way. 3 days later, we stood before Skal's cavern, my family and I, Alpha Arcturus, Luna Selene, Kieran, walking with a staff but his color returning, and me. No guards, no elders. This was to be private, the heart of the pact. Skal waited for us just outside, lying in a patch of sunlight, looking less like a mythical beast and more like an ancient, weathered monarch. His size was no less imposing, but the fury was banked, replaced by a watchful intelligence. My father approached first. He placed his fist over his heart and bowed again. guardian of the stone, we come in remembrance of the old ways and in hope for the future." Skal dipped his great head. His gaze moved to my mother, who offered a respectful nod, and then to Kieran. His stare lingered on my brother's chest where the poison lay dormant, a low rumble, thoughtful, not threatening. Kieran, to his credit, stood straight under the scrutiny. "I carry a mark of our enemy," he said, his voice clear. "I would see it used against them." Skal huffed as if in approval, then he rose and led us into the cavern. In the star-moss glow, the meeting felt momentous. We sat on the soft floor. Skal lay before us, his head resting on his paws, his golden eyes watching. "The land speaker has shown us the enemy's source," my father began. "A range of dead mountains, the Reaving's homeland. We must understand our foe. Why do they seek to spread this silent earth?" Skal's answer came not to me alone, but he pushed the understanding into the space between us, a shared vision. We all saw it, the dead mountains, but deeper we felt the hunger that emanated from that place. It wasn't just dead land. It was a void that fed on life, on magic, on connection. The Reaving weren't just making wastelands, they were feeding their homeland. They were parasites, and a living, vibrant land like ours was a feast. The anchors were like siphons, draining life back to that barren heart. "They consume," my mother whispered, horrified. "They don't just kill, they devour." A confirmation from Skal. "Then they will not stop," Kieran said, his fist clenching around his staff. "They'll send more, bigger forces, better sorcerers. They've tasted our land's strength, they'll crave it." "Yes." "Can the silent earth be healed?" I asked, the question burning in me. "Or only stopped?" Skal's mental presence grew heavy, pondering. An image came of a vast, intricate web, the network of life in a healthy land. Then an image of the web shattered, threads cut, the pattern lost. Silent earth is not sickness, it is erasure. The pattern is gone. To restore it, the concept was immense, requiring a power like a creation myth. "But a small blight, a wound like the anchors made, that can be healed?" I pressed, a sense of affirmation. "With time and care and a strong heart, the land remembers its shape." "Then our strategy is clear," Alpha Arcturus said, his strategic mind seizing the information. "We cannot be passive. We must fortify our borders with the new understanding, use the land's own awareness, guided by Alara, as an early warning, and we must gather allies. If the Reaving moves on us, they will move on others. The other pacts in the territories must be warned." The pact was not just with Silvermane. Skal's thought came, accompanied by an image of other guardians, different in form but similar in essence, in distant forests, deep lakes, and wide tundras. Other spirits of place. The old alliances have slept. They must be awakened. A daunting task, but a necessary one. "I will go," I said suddenly. The words left my mouth before I fully thought them through. "As land speaker, as your bridge, I can carry your presence, your warning. I can speak to the other pacts and perhaps feel for these other guardians." My parents looked at me with immediate concern. "It's too dangerous," my mother said. "You are known to the Reaving now, their sorcerer saw your power." "Which is why I must go," I argued, a fierce conviction rising. "I am a symbol of the pact renewed. And my connection is our best tool for finding allies. Kieran needs to stay and rebuild his strength and lead the warriors. You, father and mother, must hold the pack steady." I looked at Skal. "Will you guide me from afar?" His golden eyes held mine. A complex wave of emotion came, worry, pride, and a deep, resolute certainty. "You are the bridge, your path is to walk between. I cannot leave my heartland weakened, but my song will be with you." And he turned his head and nosed at a crevice in the cavern wall. Something clattered to the moss. It was a dagger. Its blade was made of the same strange blue metal as part of my torque, and its hilt was wrapped in fossilized wood. It hummed with the same clean, ancient power. "A shard of the living stone," his thought explained. "It will cut through lies and corruption. It will protect you." I picked it up. It felt light and perfect in my hand, an extension of my own will. "Then it is decided," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. He saw the necessity. "You will go as our emissary. To the Howling Crag pact to the east first, then the Mistwater pact to the south. We will send runners ahead to announce your coming, but the true message you must carry. The council lasted most of the day, planning routes, discussing diplomacy, and simply sitting in the shared understanding of Skal's presence. It was the first true meeting of its kind in centuries. As we prepared to leave at dusk, Kieran pulled me aside near the cavern entrance. The black veins on his neck stood out in the fading light. "Take this," he said, pressing a small, silver-embroidered pouch into my hand. "It's not magic, it's wolf's bane and silver dust practical things," and he hesitated. "I am sorry, Alara, for every time I saw you as less. You are the strongest of us all." The words healed an old, deep wound I hadn't let myself feel. "You are my brother," I said simply, "and we have a world to protect together." He nodded, a new understanding firm between us. The journey back to the pack was quiet, each of us lost in the weight and wonder of the day. That night in my old cottage, now no longer a place of exile but a place of preparation, I packed the torque, the dagger, a few supplies. Lyra came with traveling clothes, sturdy and warm. "I wish I were going with you," she said, helping me roll a blanket. "Your place is here," I said, smiling, keeping the home fires burning and weaving tales of the land speaker, no doubt. She laughed, but her eyes were worried. "Just come back, I will." The next morning I stood at the eastern edge of the territory. My father, mother, and Kieran saw me off. The entire pack gathered, a silent, respectful send-off. I was no longer the stained Omega slipping away into the woods. I was the land speaker, embarking on a quest for the survival of all. I placed my hand on the trunk of a border oak, feeling its strong, steady life. I reached for Skal. "I go." The response was a surge of strength, a mountain's benediction. "Walk with the earth beneath your feet and the stars as your guide. We are one." I turned east, towards the lands of the Howling Crag, the living dagger at my belt, the ancient torque at my throat. The forest ahead was unknown, full of potential friends and hidden enemies. But I did not go alone. I carried the song of a mountain in my soul and the hopes of my pack on my shoulders. The bridge was now a road, and I would walk it. The world beyond Silvermane territory was a tapestry of unfamiliar scents and sounds. I traveled light and fast, my senses stretched wide, listening to the land's subtle song. The further I got from Skal's immediate presence, the fainter the clear chord in my mind became, but it didn't vanish. It became a compass needle, a constant, warm pull towards home and him. In its place, I began to hear the faint, unique melodies of other places, a chattering brook's exuberance here, a granite outcrop's patient drone there. It took 2 days of steady travel to reach the borders of the Howling Crag pack. Their lands were rockier, more austere than our deep forests. Tall, wind-sculpted cliffs and narrow canyons dominated the landscape. Their sentries found me as I crossed a marked boundary stone, 2 stern-faced betas in gray furs, spears in hand. "Halt, state your name and purpose, traveler." The lead sentry's eyes scanned me, pausing on my torque and dagger, her expression wary. "I am Alara, land speaker of the Silvermane," I said, keeping my hands visible and open. "I come as an emissary of Alpha Arcturus and the guardian of the stone, Skal. I seek counsel with your Alpha on a matter of grave importance to all our lands." The sentries exchanged a look. The name Skal clearly meant something, even here. "Land speaker," the second one questioned. "It is a new title," I explained. "For one who bears the renewed pact between my pack and the ancient spirit of the Western Ridge. The message I carry concerns an enemy that threatens all such spirits and all our homes." They conferred in low tones, then the lead sentry nodded. "Follow. We will take you to Alpha Griffin, but you will be escorted." "I expect nothing less," I replied. The path to their settlement wound through impressive stone arches and along cliff faces. The Howling Crag pack made their homes in cleverly crafted stone dens and caves within the cliffs themselves. It was a fortress of rock. The people watched me pass with curious, guarded eyes. I was brought to a wide, flat mesa that served as their gathering ground before the mouth of the largest cave. Alpha Griffin emerged. He was an older wolf, his hair and close-cropped beard shot with gray, but his shoulders were broad and his eyes missed nothing. He wore a cloak of gray wolf pelt. "Silvermane sends us a lone girl with fancy jewelry," he said by way of greeting, his voice a gravelly rumble. His gaze was fixed on my torque, though that is no simple trinket. I bowed my head respectfully. "Alpha Griffin." "I am Alara. The jewelry is the torque of the old pact, given by Skal, the stormwolf of the western ridge. I come because an enemy called the Reaving is poisoning the land, seeking to create silent earth, places of death where no spirit can live and no pack can thrive. They have attacked our guardian, they will come for yours." I told the story plainly, my rejection, finding Skal, the dark iron anchors, the battle, the revelation of the Reaving's consuming hunger. I showed him the blue metal dagger. I did not demonstrate my power, the truth in my words and the weight of the artifacts had to be enough. When I finished, the mesa was silent. Alpha Griffin stroked his beard, his expression inscrutable. A pretty tale, a forgotten pact, a land-speaking savior, a hidden enemy. The Silvermane have always been prone to dramatic tales. A flash of frustration heated my chest, my voice took on an edge. "Check your southern border, Alpha, near the Black Stream. Do the fish still run? Does the moss grow green on the north side of the stones? Or is there a patch of silence where the world feels thin and cold?" His eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected such a specific challenge. He gestured to a nearby warrior who immediately loped off towards the south. "We have seen oddities," he admitted reluctantly. "A patch of blighted ground. We thought it a mineral seep, a natural thing. It is not natural," I said. "It is the first thread of a noose. The Reaving places anchors. They are subtle. They poison from the roots up. My connection to the land lets me feel them." "Let me see your blighted patch. Let me prove it." The warrior returned quickly, his face concerned. He whispered in Alpha Griffin's ear. The Alpha's demeanor shifted from skepticism to grim alertness. "It has grown," Griffin said quietly, "since the last moon." He looked at me, truly seeing me for the first time. "Very well, land speaker, show me." We went to the place, a small, rocky hollow where a spring should have bubbled. Now it was a damp, gray patch of cracked earth and sludgy water. The smell was faintly metallic. The lifelessness was a familiar, chilling void. I knelt, ignoring the suspicious stares of the howling crag warriors. I placed my hands on the cold ground. I reached for the song within me, for Skal's distant strength, and pushed my awareness down. There. Not a full anchor yet, but a seed, a sliver of dark iron driven deep, just beginning to fester, a scout's probe. "There is a shard here," I said, opening my eyes. "Deep, it's small, a test. Your land is strong, so it works slowly, but it works." "Can you remove it?" Alpha Griffin asked, his voice tight. "I can try." I drew the living stone dagger. I focused, letting its harmonious energy merge with my own. I didn't dig. I placed the tip of the dagger against the ground, directly over the seed of corruption, and pushed. The blue metal sank into the earth as if it were water. There was a faint hiss. I pulled the dagger back. Clinging to its tip, drawn out as if by magnetism, was a tiny, wicked sliver of dark iron, its violet light snuffing out as it left the earth. The effect was immediate. The gray in the soil seemed to loosen, like a clenched fist relaxing. A faint, fresh smell of wet stone emerged. It wasn't healed, not yet, but the active poison was gone. A collective gasp went through the onlookers. Alpha Griffin stared at the now dull sliver on my dagger, then at the slowly improving ground, then at me. "By the stone," he breathed. He looked at me with new eyes, respect, and a dawning fear. "This enemy, they are real." "They are," I said, standing. "And they are coming. Your guardian spirit, the spirit of these cliffs, the one you call the Stone Singer in your oldest tales, it may already feel unwell. You must seek it, renew your own pact, prepare your warriors for an attack not just on your borders, but on the soul of your land." Alpha Griffin became a whirlwind of action. The skepticism was gone, replaced by the pragmatic urgency of a leader facing a tangible threat. He agreed to send messengers to the Mistwater Pack and others, carrying his seal alongside my testimony. He vowed to seek out the stone singer. I spent 2 more days with the Howling Crag, helping them identify 2 other, even fainter blight seeds. With each one, my conviction grew. The Reaving was conducting a coordinated reconnaissance, weakening multiple points simultaneously. On the morning of my departure to head south to Mistwater, Alpha Griffin saw me off at the border stone. "Landspeaker Alara," he said, his gravelly voice sincere, "you have opened our eyes. The Howling Crag stands with the renewed pact. Tell your Alpha and your Guardian we will be ready." It was a victory, a crucial ally secured, but as I journeyed south, the success was tempered by a growing unease. The Reaving's network was wider than I'd feared. This wasn't just an attack on Silvermane, it was a systemic infection. And that night, as I made camp in a lonely stretch of hills, I felt it, a probing, cold touch against the edges of my awareness, not from the land. It was a searching, malevolent consciousness, skimming the psychic landscape like a scavenger bird over a field. It passed over me, hesitated, and moved on. They were looking, not for a pack, for a specific signature, a luminous signature, a healer, a land speaker. The sorcerer from the gully was hunting me. I clutched the torque, drawing comfort from its steady song. The road ahead was no longer just about diplomacy. It was a race to awaken the allies before the hunter found his quarry. And the silent earth, it seemed, had ears. The land softened as I moved south, the rocky crags giving way to rolling hills and then to the mist-strapped wetlands of the Mistwater Pack's territory. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth, blooming water lilies, and ancient peat. The song here was different, a layered, liquid melody of frogs, flowing channels, and deep, still pools holding secrets. But the cold, searching touch I'd felt in the hills lingered in the back of my mind, a splinter of ice in my soul. The hunter was out there. I moved with more caution, sticking to the game trails, using the land's own sounds to mask my passage. The torque was a constant warmth, and I often found myself whispering to Skull through our bond, not with words, but with a steady stream of reassurance and shared vigilance. His presence, though distant, was a watchful pressure at the edge of my consciousness, a guardian star. The Mistwater Pack found me as I navigated a labyrinth of whispering reeds. Their approach was silent. One moment I was alone, the next, 3 figures stood on hummocks of solid ground around me. They were draped in cloaks of woven rivergrass, their faces painted with subtle, watery patterns. They seemed less like warriors and more like aspects of the swamp itself. "You walk the hidden paths," the central figure, a woman with eyes the color of deep peat, observed. Her voice was a soft burble. "You carry the scent of stone and storm and of sickness." "I am Alara, landspeaker of the Silvermane," I said, repeating my introduction. "I seek Alpha Nereus. I bring warning of an enemy that poisons the roots of the world." The woman studied me, her gaze lingering on the torque. "The Silvermane Alpha's runner spoke of you, a speaker for the old ones. Come, the Alpha waits at the heart pool." They guided me through the wetlands with uncanny grace, their feet finding solid ground where I saw only murk. The Mistwater settlement was breathtaking, a village of elegant, stilt-legged lodges built over a vast, calm lake connected by rope bridges and floating walkways. Mist curled over the water's surface and the cries of waterfowl echoed. Alpha Nereus met me on a wide, central platform. He was a lean, serene man with hair the color of driftwood, but his eyes held the sharpness of a heron's gaze. He had already heard the preliminary report from Howling Crag. "Landspeaker Alara," he greeted, his tone neutral, "your warning is dire. Our scouts have reported stillness in the northern fens, a place where the frogs do not sing and the water refuses to ripple. We thought it an odd drought." "It is not a drought," I said, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the mist. "May I see it?" He took me there in a shallow, pole-guided boat. The still place was a horror in the vibrant wetland, a patch of water black and viscous like oil, lying perfectly motionless amidst the healthy reeds. No insects skated its surface, no life stirred beneath. It was a hole in the world. My hands trembled as I reached out over the boat's edge. I didn't need to touch it. The void screamed. This was no mere seed. This was a developing anchor, more advanced than the crag S. The water was the conduit here, spreading the blight faster. There is a corruption here deep in the sediment, I confirmed, my voice tight. It's growing. It will kill this entire channel, then the next, sucking the life from your territory. Can you cleanse it? Nereus asked, his serenity finally cracked by a note of dread. I must try. But as I prepared to draw my dagger, the ice splinter in my mind flared into a sharp, sudden pain, a warning shriek from the bond. I spun in the boat, looking back the way we had come. Across the misty lake near the stilt village, I saw a flicker of wrongness, a patch of mist that didn't move with the breeze, darker than the rest, and within it a familiar hooded silhouette, the hunter. He was here. He had tracked me to the mistwater. Alpha, I hissed, urgency clawing at my throat. The enemy is not just in the land, he is here, now, the sorcerer who poisoned my brother. Nereus's eyes flashed, he didn't question. He gave a low, trilling whistle that carried across the water. Instantly, figures emerged from lodges and from the reeds, armed with fish spears, nets, and bows. But the dark mist was moving, flowing across the water's surface against the wind, heading not for the village, but directly for our boat. He was coming for me. Pull back to the heart of the settlement, Nereus commanded the boatman. We moved, but the dark mist was faster. It coalesced ahead of us, solidifying into the rasping sorcerer standing upon the water as if it were stone. His hood was back now, revealing a gaunt, pale face etched with those ritual scars, his eyes pools of hungry darkness. The little healer, he crooned, his voice like dry reeds breaking. The luminous thorn in my master's side, you have led me on a merry chase. I stood in the swaying boat, drawing my living stone dagger. It blazed with blue light, pushing back the immediate aura of silent earth around him. Your anchors are failing, your poison is being rooted out. He laughed. These are but scratches, the true reaving is awakening. And you will make a fine offering. A land speaker's essence will nourish the silent heart for a decade. He raised a hand, and the black, still water around his feet began to churn, forming grasping, liquid tendrils that reached for our boat. Alpha Nereus shifted. Where a man stood was now a sleek, otter-like water wolf who dove into the lake with a splash. Other mistwater warriors did the same, attacking from beneath the surface, harrying the sorcerer, trying to break his concentration. The sorcerer snarled, swatting at them with blasts of corrosive energy that turned water to steam. But they were agile, using the lake itself as cover. This was my chance, not to fight him but to wound his purpose here. As he was distracted, I turned my back on the confrontation and focused entirely on the blighted, still patch of water. I plunged my dagger deep into the heart of the black pool from the boat. I didn't just extract, I called. I poured my will, my fear, my fury into the dagger and threw it into the corrupted sediment. I called on the memory of clean water, of flowing streams of life. I amplified it with everything I had, with the distant, roaring strength of Skull, who I felt pounding against the edges of the bond, desperate to aid but too far to intervene physically. The dagger blazed like a fallen star. The black water erupted. Not in a geyser of corruption, but in a convulsion of cleansing agony. The dark iron anchor deep below shattered. The viscous water swirled, cleared, and suddenly flowed, merging with the healthy lake, the blight diluted and broken. The sorcerer screamed, a raw, furious sound. He felt it. The loss of the anchor was a wound to his scheme. You insect, he roared, turning his full attention back to me. He blasted the water around our boat, sending it rocking violently. A mistwater warrior cried out, struck by a bolt of black energy. I was thrown to my knees in the boat, the dagger still clutched in my hand. The sorcerer strode across the water towards me, his hand outstretched, fingers curled like claws aimed at my heart. "Your light goes out now," he hissed. I had nowhere to run. I braced, raising the dagger, knowing it wasn't enough. Then the lake beneath the sorcerer exploded, not from magic but from pure, immense force. A colossal, scaled head the size of a wagon, with eyes like ancient jade, erupted from the depths. It was a creature of legend, the guardian of the mistwater, the serpent of the deep pools. It clamped its jaws around the sorcerer's leg. The sorcerer's scream was one of genuine terror and shock. His concentration shattered, the dark mist evaporated. He beat at the serpent's snout with bursts of black energy, which sizzled against its iridescent scales but did not penetrate. Alpha Nereus, back in human form, surfaced near the boat, gasping. The serpent, it hasn't stirred in 50 years. The pact, it was remembering too. The serpent shook its massive head, and with a final, sickening crunch it dragged the sorcerer beneath the black water. There was a thrash, a gurgle, and then silence. The lake settled. The serpent's great jade eye turned to me. It dipped its head once in acknowledgement, then slid back into the depths, leaving only ripples. I sat in the boat, trembling, the adrenaline crashing. The immediate hunter was gone, but his final words echoed, "The true reaving is awakening." We poled back to the village in stunned silence. That night, in a lodge smelling of cedar and wet stone, Alpha Nereus made his vow. "The pact is alive, you have our allegiance, land speaker. The mistwater will stand with silver mane and stone. We will send word to the marshes and the coasts. This enemy must be met with a united front." It was a greater victory than I could have hoped for. 2 guardians awakened, 2 packs allied, but as I tried to sleep, listening to the lap of water against the stilts, the cold fear remained. The sorcerer was dead, but he was a tool, a servant. The true reaving was awakening, and I had just made myself its prime target. My journey was no longer just about seeking allies. It was about getting home to the heart of the pact before the storm finally broke. The journey back to Silvermane territory was a blur of urgent travel. I ran when I could, walked when I had to, my senses screaming at every strange sound, every shadow that lingered too long. The hunter was gone, but his master was out there. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of life muted, waiting. I felt Skal's presence growing stronger with every mile, a beacon pulling me home. Our bond thrummed with a mixture of relief and a deep, gathering tension. He had felt the confrontation on the lake, the surge of power, the serpent's awakening. He had felt my fear. Now he felt my hurried return, and it confirmed his own growing unease. I crossed into Silvermane land 5 days after leaving Mistwater. The familiar scent of pine and home brought tears of relief to my eyes, but they were short-lived. The sentries who found me wore expressions of grim readiness, not welcome. "Land speaker," one said, bowing his head briefly. "The Alpha commands you to the lodge immediately upon your return." Things have moved quickly. My heart sank. I ran the last stretch. The pack settlement was a fortress preparing for siege. The outer palisade was being reinforced with sharpened stakes. Warriors drilled in squads, their movements sharp, focused. There were new faces, 2 warriors in the gray of Howling Crag and the rivergrass green of Mistwater, integrated into our formations. I burst into the Alpha's lodge. The war council was in session, but it had tripled in size. Alpha Arcturus and Luna Selene were at the head, with Kieran standing strong beside them, the black veins on his skin visible but seemingly stable. Flanking them were Alpha Griffin of the Howling Crag and Alpha Nereus of the Mistwater. Elders from all 3 packs lined the walls. All conversations stopped as I entered. "Ilara," my father's voice was heavy with relief and strain. "You return in time. What happened?" I asked, my gaze sweeping the room. It was Kieran who answered, stepping forward. His eyes were hard, the eyes of a soldier who has seen the enemy's disposition. "Scouts from all 3 territories and from farther afield, the reaving isn't just probing anymore. They're mobilizing. War bands, large ones, have been sighted converging from the dead mountains. They're moving with purpose. They're coming here. Why here? I asked, though a part of me already knew. Alpha Nereus spoke, his watery voice grave. Because you are here, land speaker, and the guardian you are bonded to is here. Our reports suggest the reaving sorcerers speak of a convergence. They believe that consuming a place where a major spirit of the land is physically manifest, and the human bridge bonded to it, will grant them enough power to trigger the full silent earth curse across the entire region. You and Skal are not just a threat to them. You are a prize. The room felt suddenly airless. They weren't just attacking a pack. They were launching a crusade to devour the heart of the living land itself, using us as the catalyst. How long? My voice was a whisper. 3 days. Maybe 4, Alpha Griffin rumbled, pounding a fist on the table. They move slow, laden with their foul sorcery tools, but they are relentless. They are cutting a swath of blight as they come, making their own dead ground to advance upon. I looked at my father. We have to meet them, not at our walls. We cannot let them bring their silent earth to our doorstep. We must fight them in the buffer lands where the ground is still neutral. Agreed, my father said. We have united our forces. The Howling Crag brings stone slingers and climbers. The Mistwater brings marsh fighters and healers versed in water lore. We Silvermane form the core of the warrior line, but against their corruption, their magic, he looked at me. You and Skal are our answer to that. Skal cannot leave the ridge for long, I said, the memory of his weariness from holding the land together fresh in my mind. His power is rooted there. If he strays too far for too long, the heart weakens. Then we bring the battle to the ridge, Kieran stated flatly. All eyes turn to him. We make our stand on the sacred ground itself. We use every advantage, the high ground, the terrain Skal knows. And we force them to fight on land that is alive, land that will fight back with him. It was bold, desperate, but it was the only strategy that made sense. They will expect that, Alpha Nereus cautioned. Let them, I said, a sudden, fierce certainty rising in me. I touched the torque. They expect a guardian tied to a place. They expect a pact defending its home. They do not expect a pact in full concert. They do not expect the land itself to be a conscious ally. A plan began to form, born from desperation and the unique abilities of our combined forces. We would funnel them into the valleys approaching the western ridge. The Howling Crag would harry them from the heights with rocks and arrows. The Mistwater would turn the lower grounds into treacherous bogs. The Silvermane would hold the main passes, and I would be with Skal at the eye of the storm, our bond the linchpin, directing the land's wrath. The next 2 days were a frenzy of preparation. I spent hours on the ridge with Skal, our minds intertwined, planning, sharing the maps drawn by the scouts, feeling the pathways of his power. He showed me how the ley lines converged on his cavern, how we could use them to amplify certain effects, to cause tremors in specific passes, to guide cleansing rains, to empower the living plants to entangle and hinder. The night before the predicted arrival of the reaving vanguard, I stood with my family on the ceremonial platform. The pack was silent, gathered below, a united army of 3 peoples under the moon. Alpha Arcturus spoke to them all, his voice carrying on the still air. Tomorrow we do not fight for territory alone. We fight for the song of the world, for the right of the land to live, and for our children to hear its music. We fight alongside legends remembered. Stand with your brothers and sisters of the crag and the Mistwater. Stand with the land speaker and stand with the guardian of the stone. A roar went up, a single voice from 3 throats. It shook the very stars. Later, alone with Kieran, I finally asked the question that had haunted me. The poison with the battle coming. He unbuttoned his tunic top. The black veins were there, but they seemed integrated, less like a corruption, more like dark, intricate tattoos over his heart. It doesn't hurt, it's quiet. Yana thinks the land energy you used and the destruction of the anchors forced it to change. It's not feeding anymore, it's just there, a part of me now. He met my eyes. Maybe it will be a weapon, their poison turned to my shield. I hugged him then tightly. My proud, wounded brother, stay alive tomorrow. You too, little sister, he murmured into my hair. The world needs its bridge. I went to the cavern one last time. Skull was waiting, a mountain of shadow and simmering power. I laid my hand on his shoulder, feeling the immense, earth-slow beat of his heart through my palm. Are we ready? I asked in the quiet of our joined minds. His answer was not in words, but in a flood of sensation. The steadfastness of stone, the patience of forests, the enduring fury of a river cutting through rock. It was the essence of a world that refused to die. We are the land, his thought resonated. And we will not be silent. I stayed there until dawn began to blush the eastern sky. Then, with the torque cold and heavy and right around my neck and the living stone dagger at my hip, I walked out to face the coming dawn. To the east, the first light of day was beautiful. To the north, a line of darkness stained the horizon, not clouds. The silent earth was on the march, and we were ready to sing our answer. Dawn broke not with hope, but with a dull, copper glow that failed to dispel the creeping chill. From my vantage on the ridge, beside Skal, where he stood like a carved idol of storm and granite, I watched the reaving come. They did not march like an army. They spread like a stain, a dark, seething mass of figures in ashen leathers, their movements unnaturally synchronized, flowing around the skeletal trees they had created in their advance. At their heart I could feel it, a pulsing, hollow absence that was the focal point of their sorcery, the convergence engine. The thing meant to devour Skal and me and vomit out silent earth. Our allied forces were hidden, a living trap. Silvermane warriors, teeth bared, waited in the forest at the base of the formal stairs. Howling crag fighters lurked among the rocks above the passes. Mistwater teams lurked in the streams and bogs to the east, ready to drown and ensnare. The reaving vanguard hit the first Silvermane line. The snarls and clash of steel shattered the morning. I felt each loss, each spark of pack life extinguished like a pinprick of cold in my soul. Skal tensed beside me, a low, subsonic growl vibrating the stone beneath our feet. Not yet, I thought, pouring calm along our bond. Wait, the battle was a chaotic tapestry. Our plan worked at first. The crag's rock slides cut off flanking routes. Mistwater's bogs swallowed whole squads of reaving soldiers who stepped where solid ground should be. Our warriors fought with the ferocity of those defending their world's soul, but the reaving had numbers, and they had their sorcerers. Figures in darker robes raised staffs of twisted dark iron, and waves of gray energy swept out. Where it touched, vibrant green leaves withered to dust in seconds. Warriors screamed as their strength was siphoned, their connection to the living world momentarily severed, leaving them vulnerable to the slash of curved blades. They were pushing through, paying a terrible price in bodies, but pushing, towards the ridge, towards us. Now, Kieran, I whispered, though he couldn't hear me. From a concealed position partway up the slope, my brother gave a signal. A group of Silvermane warriors, those carrying not swords but heavy, silver-headed drums, began to beat a deep, resonant rhythm. It was the heartbeat of the pack, a sound meant to strengthen the bond, to remind every fighter of what they defended. Against the reaving silence, it was a weapon. The gray waves of energy faltered slightly where the sound waves hit. It was our cue. I placed both hands on Skal's shoulder. I opened myself completely, not as a conduit for a trickle of power, but as a floodgate. Now, Skal threw back his head and roared. This was not the roar that had shaken the basin. This was the voice of the land itself in agony and defiance. It rolled down the mountainside like a physical avalanche of sound. The very air shimmered. Reaving soldiers clutched their ears, stumbling. Several of the lesser sorcerers' staffs cracked, and the land answered. Roots erupted from the ground, tripping and grasping. Vines grown thick overnight lashed like whips. The wind, which had been still, howled down the passes, carrying dust and debris into the eyes of the invaders. The allied packs, emboldened, redoubled their attack, driving the disoriented reaving back into the killing zones. but from the heart of the enemy mass, a deeper darkness stirred. The convergence engine was moving. 4 massive, hulking figures, reaving behemoths clad in plates of dark iron, carried a palanquin holding a pulsating obsidian sphere. Around it walked 3 senior sorcerers, their combined power creating a dome of utter silence that pushed back Skull's roar and the land's retaliation. They began a slow, unstoppable advance up the main path directly toward us. Their silence ate the drumbeat. It killed the plants at their feet. They were a bubble of coming nothingness. They were the spearhead, and they were coming for the heart. Skull's rage was a furnace. He wanted to charge, to meet them in the valley, to crush them. But I felt his tethers, the strain of holding so much land awake and angry. If he left the ridge's apex, the heart would waver and the widespread effects would falter. "We hold the high ground," I said aloud, my voice thin against the wind. "We make them come to us." The battle below raged, a stalemate of fury against relentless, draining silence. Our forces bled and fought, containing the bulk of the army, but they could not stop the spearhead. The 3 sorcerers and their silent sphere climbed, step by step, leaving a dead, gray path behind them. They reached the final approach, the broad platform before the cavern. Our last line of defense, a mixed unit of the best from all 3 packs, led by Talia and a scarred howling crag captain, stood waiting. Kieran was among them. The sorcerers didn't even break stride. The lead one, a figure so shrouded in darkness only twin red embers showed for eyes, lifted a hand. A wave of pure negation swept out. It didn't cut or burn, it unmade. 3 warriors at the front simply ceased, their forms dissolving into motes of gray ash. Horror paralyzed the line for a fatal second. The behemoths lumbered forward, crushing those who couldn't dodge. No, Kieran's shout was raw. He didn't attack the behemoths. He shifted and lunged not at the body, but at the sphere on the palanquin. His claws, tipped with the strange darkness of his own scar, raked across the obsidian surface. A hairline crack appeared. A shriek of psychic feedback echoed from the sorcerers. The dome of silence flickered. One of the sorcerers turned its burning gaze on Kieran. It pointed a skeletal finger. "Kieran, move," I screamed. He tried to leap away, but a bolt of condensed silent earth, blacker than shadow, shot forth and struck him in the chest, right over the dark veins. He collapsed, shifting back to human form, convulsing. The sight unleashed something primal in me. A scream of pure, undiluted fury tore from my throat, and I didn't need the bond. Skull and I moved as one. He surged forward off the apex, covering the distance to the platform in 2 colossal bounds. I slid from his shoulder, landing running, my living stone dagger blazing in my hand. The sorcerers focused on Skull, hurling bolts of erasing energy. They bounced off his hide, but each impact made him flinch, a flicker of pain in our bond. They were trying to unravel him from the outside in. The behemoths moved to intercept me. I didn't try to fight them. I dove, rolled between the legs of one, and came up sprinting towards the cracked sphere. The second sorcerer, the one who had struck Kieran, turned to me. "The bridge ends here," it rasped, voice like grinding stone. It cast a web of silencing threads at me. I slashed with my dagger. The blue light severed the gray threads, but more came. I was driven back towards the cliff edge. On the platform, Skull was a whirlwind of claws and fangs, keeping 2 sorcerers and the behemoths occupied, but he was being slowly surrounded, pressed. Each touch of their magic was a cold burn on his spirit. Our bond was flooding with his strain. I was cornered. The sorcerer advanced, preparing a final, annihilating spell. In that moment, I didn't think of spells or strategy or the pact. I thought of my brother lying still. I thought of the Star Moss cavern. I thought of the first time I pulled a thorn from a giant's shoulder. I stopped fighting the threads. I dropped my dagger. I raised my hands, not in attack, but in offering. I opened the void within me, the place where the pack bond never grew, and I filled it with one thing, the pure, unwavering memory of life. The smell of rain on pine, the taste of a summer berry, the feel of warm moss, the sound of my mother's laugh. The sight of Skull's golden eyes, clear and knowing, I poured it all out not as power but as a story, a testament. The sorcerer's spell hit me, the silence rushed in, it was cold, it was empty, it was the end of all things, it tried to swallow my story, my memories, but a story told with your whole soul is a hard thing to kill. The silence hesitated, strained. And in that hesitation, a howl erupted from below, not a roar of rage but a song of pure, defiant life. It was the united howl of every Silvermane, howling crag and Mistwater warrior who still stood. It was the drumbeat, it was the splash of water. It was the crack of stone, it was the pact refusing the silence. The sorcerer flinched, its concentration broken for a split second, it was enough. From the cliff edge behind me, a torrent of clean, living water, summoned and guided by every remaining Mistwater healer below, erupted over the ridge and crashed down onto the platform, dousing the sorcerers, the behemoths, the sphere. The sphere, already cracked, hissed violently. The dark energy within it destabilized. Skull seized the moment. With a final, earth-shattering roar of triumph, he brought his two front paws down onto the palanquin and onto the sphere. There was no explosion, there was an implosion. A silent, inward suck of all the corrupted energy, followed by a burst of blinding, white-green light that washed over the platform. When the light faded, the sphere was gone. The behemoths were piles of inert, rusted metal. The three senior sorcerers were on their knees, their dark robes now just tattered gray rags, their magical presence shattered, leaving only frail, horrified men. The dome of silence was gone. The remaining reaving army below, feeling the heart of their power extinguish, broke. Their relentless advance turned into a chaotic rout cut down by the vengeful allied pacts. On the platform it was over. I stumbled to Kieran. He was breathing shallowly. The black veins on his chest were glowing with a soft, silver light, the same light from my dagger from my memories. The Reaving's killing bolt had interacted with the dormant poison in a way we couldn't have predicted. It wasn't hurting him, it was changing, but he was alive. I looked up at Skull. He was panting, smoke rising from where the dark magic had touched him, but he stood tall, the sovereign of a scarred but living mountain. His golden eyes met mine, and in them I saw an exhaustion deeper than the sea and a pride as tall as the peaks. We had held, the convergence had failed, the silent earth had been met with a chorus of life and had found it could not be silenced. Victory, I learned, was not a clear, bright bell sounding. It was a ragged, gasping thing, born in the silence after the last clash of steel. The platform was a landscape of aftermath. The broken, gray-clad forms of the shattered sorcerers were being bound by grim-faced warriors. The allied packs moved among our own wounded, the sounds of pain a terrible counterpoint to the fading drumbeat of war. My world had shrunk to the space around my brother. Kieran lay still, his breathing shallow but steady. The black veins on his chest now pulsed with that strange, soft silver light, like moonlight flowing through dark river channels. It was beautiful and unsettling. Yana, our head healer, scrambled up the path with her assistants. She pushed me gently aside, her hands already glowing with the soft green energy of her craft. She examined Kieran, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The killing curse," she murmured, her fingers hovering over the silver-lit patterns. "It interacted with the dormant blight poison. It's fused. I don't understand its nature, but it's not attacking him. His life force is strong, stable." She looked at me, awe and confusion in her eyes. It's as if the two opposing corruptions canceled each other out, leaving behind something else. Will he wake? My voice was hoarse from screaming. He is deeply unconscious. His spirit has been through a forge. We must let him rest. She directed the assistants to carry him carefully down to the healing tents. I watched them go, a hollow ache in my chest. He had saved us. His desperate strike at the sphere had been the key. A warm, heavy presence nudged my back. Skull. He was lowering his great head, his breath stirring my hair. I turned and leaned into him, pressing my face against his fur, which smelled of ozone, stone, and a faint, sad scent of burnt magic. He was exhausted. I could feel it through our bond, a deep, foundational weariness, holding the land's fury, resisting the unmaking spells it had cost him. "You are hurt," I sent, my mental voice thick with worry. A scratch on the mountain came the weary, affectionate thought. The heart is steady. The silence is broken. He looked toward the cavern. We must speak, all of us. The council of the pact reconvened not in the lodge, but under the open sky at the cavern entrance. Alpha Arcturus, Luna Selene, Alpha Griffin, and Alpha Nereus gathered, their faces etched with the strain of command and loss. I stood between them and Skull, the living bridge. My father spoke first, his voice gravelly. "The reaving force is shattered. The survivors are fleeing north back toward the dead mountains. Our scouts will harry them to the border. They will return," Alpha Griffin stated, not as a question but a fact. "A hunger like that does not simply forget." "They will," I said, finding my voice. All eyes turned to me. "But not soon. Their convergence engine is destroyed. Their senior sorcerers are captured or dead. Their belief in their inevitable silence has been broken today. It will take time to rebuild that." Alpha Nereus nodded slowly. "Time we will use. The pact is proven. We must formalize it, not just between our packs, but between all the spirits of the land. Your journey, land speaker, showed us the way. We must awaken the other guardians, forge a network of living places that can resist the blight together." Hope, fragile but real, began to bloom amidst the exhaustion. This was more than just survival. This was the beginning of a new way. "And what of him?" Griffin asked, gesturing with his chin toward Skull. "What does the Guardian will?" Skull's thought flowed through me, and I translated aloud. "The pact is remembered. It will be written not on parchment, but in the understanding of the land. The ridges and high places are under his ward, the valleys and forests under our care. We will tend the wounds of the earth together. He asks for one thing, that the sacred trials end. No more alphas will come to dominate. They may come to seek counsel if they approach with respect." My father bowed his head. "It is done. The old way is dead. A new one is born today." The discussions turned practical. Establishing shared patrols, creating a council of land speakers. I was to be the first, and would train others with the aptitude, planning the healing of the blighted lands along the border. It was the work of a lifetime, laid out in the shadow of a great victory. As the leaders descended to oversee the cleanup and care for their people, I stayed. The cavern called to me, a quiet balm against the noise in my soul. Inside, in the star-moss glow, the weight of it all finally hit me. The faces of the fallen, Kieran's still form, the terrifying cold of the sorcerer's silence. I sank to my knees, the torque heavy on my collarbones, and wept. Skull lay down around me, a living wall of warmth and fur, enclosing me in a protective circle. He didn't send thoughts. He just shared his presence, ancient, scarred, enduring. He had seen centuries pass. He had seen battles before. He knew the cost of standing firm. After a long time, my tears subsided. I placed a hand on the moss, feeling its gentle, living pulse. "We did it," I whispered. A soft rumble of agreement echoed in his chest. Then an image came, a sapling pushing through cracked, scorched earth. New growth, always new growth. The message was clear. The fight was over. The work was just beginning, and I was not alone. I had a family that finally saw me. I had a brother with a destiny rewritten in silver and shadow. I had allies across the land. And I had a mountain at my back. The rejected Omega was gone forever. In her place was the land speaker, the bridge, the woman who had reminded a world how to sing. And as the first stars winked to life in the slice of sky visible through the cavern's opening, I knew with a bone-deep certainty that my song was just finding its voice. A week passed. The scarred land began to breathe again. The reaving's gray blight, severed from its source, slowly receded like a sickened tide, leaving behind bare but clean earth ready for healing. Allied warriors from the three packs worked together to clear the battlefield, burning the corrupted remnants with sacred herbs, singing songs of mourning and renewal. Kieran slept for 3 days. When he finally awoke, it was not with a gasp, but with a slow, deep inhalation, as if he were breathing properly for the first time. I was at his side in the healing tent. His eyes, the clear, sharp blue of our father's, opened. They were free of pain, free of the fevered intensity of the poison. They were calm, deep. "Ilara," he said, his voice a dry rasp. I helped him sip water. "Welcome back." He looked down at his own chest, now bare. The black veins were still there, but they were forever changed. They looked less like cracks and more like intricate, deliberate tattoos inlaid with that subtle, permanent silver light. They pulsed softly in time with his heartbeat. He touched them, his expression one of awe, not horror. "It doesn't hurt," he said, wonder in his tone. "It feels solid, like armor. I can feel it humming, a different song." Yana, who had been monitoring him constantly, approached. "The opposing magics have neutralized and merged into something entirely new. It's part of your life force now, Alfair. It is neither pack magic nor land magic. It is yours." And, she added, a cautious smile touching her lips, "it seems to resonate strongly against any remaining traces of silent earth corruption. You may find you have a unique affinity for cleansing it." Kieran looked from her to me, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time in months. It transformed him. The arrogant pride was gone, replaced by a hard-won, quiet strength. A weapon from a wound, he mused, fitting. He was weak, but his recovery was swift. The very energy that had nearly killed him now seemed to fortify him. Within days, he was walking, then training, relearning his body with its new, silver-scarred core. The formal signing of the Pact of Renewed Stone took place on the platform before Skull's cavern. It was a simple, powerful ceremony. The 3 alphas each placed their hand on a single, large river stone brought by Nereus. I placed mine atop theirs. And then Skull lowered his muzzle, touching his nose to the top of our pile. A warmth flowed into the stone, and the braided metals of my torque shimmered. The stone wasn't marked, but everyone present felt the oath settle into the land itself, a binding promise of mutual protection and respect. Afterward, Alpha Griffin and Nereus prepared to return to their own lands, taking with them warriors, healers, and the promise of regular councils. They also took something else, the desire to find their own land speakers, those sensitive to the old songs within their own territories. My father watched them go, his arm around my mother. "A new age," he said quietly. "The age we should have never left," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. My role was now clearly defined, yet wonderfully vast. I was the chief land speaker. My days were split between the ridge deepening my bond with Skull and learning the intricate language of the land's health, and the pack where I began working with Yana and others to identify pups and adults who showed signs of sensitivity, a pull towards certain places, an unusual empathy for plants or animals' dreams of earth and stone. We started a small, tentative school of the old ways. Lyra was among the first students. Her weaver's sensitivity for patterns translated into a gift for feeling the patterns of energy in a meadow. She beamed with a new purpose. One evening, as the first fireflies of summer blinked over the recovering forest, Kieran found me at the edge of the training grounds. He moved with a new, grounded grace. "I've been thinking," he said, falling into step beside me. "The Reaving heartland, the dead mountains. The blight there is complete, the pattern is erased like Skull showed you." I nodded, a familiar weight settling. "Yes, it can't be healed, only contained." "Or isolated," Kieran said, his silver-lit scars gleaming faintly in the dusk. "Their power comes from that dead place. What if we could cut it off, not with an army, but with a barrier, a living wall fueled by the pact, guarded by those who carry its resonance?" He looked at me, his eyes fierce. "A task for a land speaker and a silver scar guardian." I stared at him, the magnitude of the idea unfolding. It wasn't about more battle, it was about sustainable defense, a project that would take years, maybe generations, a permanent symbol of the pact's vigilance. It would be a long journey, I whispered, a dangerous one. To the very edge of the dead place, he placed a hand on his chest. I have a map on my skin that leads there, and you have a mountain in your soul that can guide us. He grinned, the old, confident Kieran shining through, but tempered now, wiser. Besides, someone has to keep you out of trouble, little sister. I laughed, the sound feeling free and light. The future, once a terrifying blank, now had contours. It had challenges, yes, but it had purpose. It had family, it had hope. We stood there as the stars emerged, two siblings marked by the same war in different ways, looking not at what was lost, but at what could be built. The silence between us was no longer the silence of the stain or of the reaving. It was the comfortable, resilient silence of understanding, of a pact renewed not just between pack and land, but between a brother and a sister, ready to face whatever came next together. A full cycle of the moon passed. The green returned to the western ridge with a vengeance, as if the land itself was celebrating. Wildflowers bloomed in the once blighted gully. The pack settlement hummed with a new, vibrant energy. The memory of the battle was a sobering scar, but the promise of the pact was the balm. My days found a rhythm. Mornings were spent in the Star Moss Cavern with Skull. Our communication had evolved beyond images and emotions into something closer to true silent speech, a flowing exchange of concepts, memories, and knowledge. He taught me to listen to the health of a forest by the taste of the wind, to feel the pulse of a watershed through the soles of my feet. I was learning to be his voice in the world of men. Afternoons were for the students. In a sunny clearing, we sat on the grass. Lyra and 3 others, a young beta male who could find underground water and 2 quiet omega girls who could calm agitated animals with a touch, listened as I guided them to feel the song of the clearing. It was slow, patient work. Not everyone would bond with a great guardian like Skull, but everyone, I believed, could learn to hear the land's subtle music and act in harmony with it. One such afternoon, a visitor arrived. A traveler from a distant eastern pack, the Sunshadow, drawn by the tales of the War of the Silent Earth and the land speaker of Silvermane. He was an elder, wise-eyed, and he carried with him fragmentary clay tablets inscribed with the oldest script. "We have stories," he told my father and me, his fingers tracing the etched symbols, "of a time when great spirits walked and wolves were their stewards. We have a name for the blight you fought. We call it the world forgetting. And we have a legend that one would come, bondless yet bound to all, to remind the world of its name." He looked directly at me and at the torque around my neck. "It seems the legend is true." His words spread, carried by traders and travelers. Emissaries from other packs, some skeptical, some hopeful, began to trickle in to learn of the pact, to see the recovered land, to meet the land speaker and the Silver Scar heir. We were becoming a beacon. A living proof that the old ways were not just stories, but a viable, powerful path forward. On the night of the summer solstice, the greatest gathering since the battle took place, not just Silvermane, but representatives from Howling Crag, Mistwater, and now Sunshadow were present. It was a festival of unity. A feast was laid on the ceremonial clearing, and for the first time I sat at the high table with my family, not as an afterthought, but as an honored leader in my own right. As the fires burned high and the stories were shared, my father stood. The crowd hushed. "We gather under a moon that has seen our failure and our redemption," he began, his voice carrying love and authority. "We have faced a darkness that sought to unmake memory itself. And we found our light not in forgetting who we were, but in remembering what we had always been meant to be, stewards, partners, a part of the living world, not its masters." He turned to me. "Ilara, land speaker, daughter of my heart, you brought us that memory. You showed us the bridge. Will you lead us in the first song of this new age?" It was not a command, it was a request, the ultimate acknowledgement. I stood. I walked to the center of the clearing, feeling the eyes of hundreds upon me, packmates, allies, friends. I felt Skull's attention, a warm, steady pressure from the ridge. I felt Kieran's proud, supportive gaze. I did not sing a war chant or a hunting cry. I closed my eyes, touched the torque, and did what felt most natural. I began to hum. A low, resonant note that was not my own, but the echo of the mountain's heartbeat. I poured into it my gratitude for the forest that sheltered us, for the water that quenched us, for the stone that grounded us. And then I began to sing wordlessly. A melody that was the whisper of leaves, the chuckle of a stream, the sigh of wind over stone. It was the land's lullaby and its battle hymn. One by one, others joined, not with my melody, but with their own. Lyra wove in a softer, rhythmic thread like a clicking loom. The waterfinder beta added a clear, rippling note. The animal-soothing omges added a harmony of gentle, breathing calm. The warriors added a deep, percussive beat from their chests. The howling crag visitors added a stony, echoing resonance. The Mistwater folk added a fluid, undulating layer. It was not a uniform song. It was a symphony of different voices, different territories, different gifts, all harmonizing, a living testament to the pact. As the song swelled, filling the night, I opened my eyes, and I saw it. A faint, shimmering light, silver, green, blue, and gold, seemed to rise from the singers, from the very ground, weaving together in the air above the clearing. A visible manifestation of our united will, our renewed connection to a world that was fighting to live. It lasted only a few breathtaking seconds before fading, but the feeling it left of profound unity, of impossible hope made tangible, lingered long into the night. Later, I climbed to the ridge. Skull was waiting on the platform, watching the distant fires of the celebration below. You heard, I thought. All the land heard, he replied, his mental voice rich with a satisfaction deeper than any roar. That was the true convergence. Not of silence, but of song. You have not just defended a mountain, Alara. You have rekindled a world. I stood beside him, looking out over the territory that was my home, my responsibility, my heart. The journey from the rejected, bondless girl in the mud to this moment felt like a dream woven from thorn and starlight. The reaving was still out there. The dead mountains still stood. Kieran's and my long journey to isolate them lay ahead. There would be more challenges, more scars. But as I stood with the ancient wolf under the infinite stars, the chorus of my pack and our allies still echoing faintly on the wind, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We were no longer just surviving, we were singing, and our song had only just begun. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, ring the bell icon for notifications, and let me know what you think in the comments. Your feedback is what guides the next tale. And if you'd like to give an extra boost of support to our creative team, you can also send a super thanks. It helps us continue bringing you stories like this.